be going out. So,
oh, interesting.
I couldn't think of a better person to start with. Greg Putnam, Navy SEAL, rancher,
Yeah,
cowboy. What are you, cowboy?
Ranchman. Ranch operator. And cattle company and
just like all around Montana, cool guy. Like just way cooler than me.
Those are Montana skill sets that will
former guide.
That's true.
Just a long list, and I mean I could keep going on through this list, but I just had to talk to you. I sent you the message 2 months ago, and you're like, let's do this. And then you're like, hey, instead of like let's do this through Zoom, come out to Bozeman. And I was like, let's.
And I've been following along with a lot of like the things that you've been doing, and I feel like we've been kind of like in touch. But it's great to sit down and again, I would much prefer to do it in person, and I feel like there's just a lot more to those conversations when you don't have to do it over Zoom. I think everybody's pretty well sick of having to do those, so it's nice to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to it.
So why am I here? Obviously, he's a retired Navy SEAL, combat Navy SEAL. Now he's got, I knew you were a Navy SEAL, and I thought that was cool as hell in itself. But then when I heard about your most recent project, Navy SEAL is awesome. I mean, you're obviously, super elite, cooler than me. But the cattle project, we're going to get to that.
Sure.
So, but I want to start back, not in the beginning, but how we got to this point today, how we got to Bozeman, Montana. The point of this podcast is to talk to and kind of get through our comfort zones, right? So we've got, and this is just my theory, where we have this window of choices in our life where there's comfort, and then there's discomfort, and then there's all of the choices we can make in the middle, and then there's a certain little gray area where people kind of think they're getting out of the comfort zone, but perhaps are getting stuck in this gray area and want to do something where they can't do it. For whatever the reason may be, they can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're here. That's the point of this conversation. Talk to Greg and figure out, get some insight as to what took Greg out of those gray areas and make the choices he did to land here. So you're from Philly.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Philadelphia in Washington's Crossing, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour and change east of Philadelphia, kind of right on the Delaware River there. And, like when I grew up there, it was, a lot of farms and things. And like a lot of those places have now been replaced with houses. And, but it was a great place to grow up. I had a great childhood, and I had two brothers and my parents, and, we lived and grew up there and kind of normal, like went to regular high school, played sports, not at any high level, but like had a great group of buddies in high school that all have done like a variety of things. But also I think that was like something for me, like foundationally, like that group of friends in my life was always like something that was like extremely important to me. And my high school buddies like far exceeded any friends that I ever had, in college. And I think like the drive and the ultimate like success of a lot of those people had like a bit of influence on me kind of like overall, in my life. And I'd say from like growing up high school wise, like probably the biggest takeaway for me was number one, I was not a good student. Like never really did great with school. I did great on like the things that I liked, but I was not like a great all around student. But I had like this really like great group of friends. And I think that group of friends who like, we all started being friends, from like elementary school and junior high, and then like all the way through, and still like very, very close friends of mine today. But I think that like foundation of surrounding yourself with like really high quality people, number one, highlights like when you aren't doing that. But you can also see like the positive effect that like those other like positive people have kind of on you. But yeah, that's kind of where I grew up. And
are you still connected with many of them?
Yeah, I still talk to a lot of those folks. I would, one of, those people, I definitely still talk to them all, I'd say on a regular basis. And there's probably, 5 of those guys that I'm still really close with, but like they still come out here and visit. They're guys I could call and say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, or, they're just good friends. They're like literally like lifelong friends, and they're friends that you grew up with, and they're again like great friends, not only because they're like good people that you've had like great times and shared experiences with, but they're also great friends because like they encourage you to do, different things, or they encourage you to be better. And they, not so much in calling you on like, oh, you need to be better, but they do interesting things, and they're just like good people. And so I'd say like for me, like probably one of like my bigger early like takeaways was, kind of surrounding yourself with the right people, and people that are going to like ultimately make you better.
It's like what we were talking about before we started recording. We want people, I guess we're generally surrounded with people, or I guess allow ourselves to be surrounded with people who want to level up instead of bring you down.
Exactly.
Because they don't want to take that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember
meet the level instead of bring others down.
Yeah. And even sometimes they're doing things like whether it's in their own businesses or their personal lives or their families, where you see them doing things and you're like, oh, wow, like they're doing some awesome stuff. Like, and it makes you want to either like keep doing, awesome stuff. But again, you're right. It's like elevating. And I think when you have those friends, it's like so valuable because you're all kind of like moving the ball together versus people that are like taking away from you. And I've had that too. And I think that feeling of like that drag is something that, really makes you appreciate when you're surrounding yourself with like really high quality people. And I think you're going to kind of hear as we like talk about that, like for me, and I guess I never really thought about it, and I don't know why I just did, but that's definitely like a recurring theme, like throughout my life, is the people that I've been able to surround myself with. And I would always say that those people were always like far better than me and have all like made me better. And like, that's what I really like value in like the groups of people that I, surround myself with. And I don't have time for it like any longer. Like that is something that like, I guess I kind of demand of like the network of friends that I keep. And,
well, I knew a lot of them. I said like our mutual friends, and Mike, but then I met a lot of them through, sure. I mean, they're all motivated guys.
Absolutely motivated. And again, I think that you just learn, especially from a young age, of what that can do to help elevate your game. And it took me probably a little bit of time to kind of like really figure that out.
Yeah.
And just some like different experiences that really like solidify that. But I think as we kind of like talk through that, and again, like I would, like I remember going and visiting you guys at Pitt and like seeing your friend group and how like motivated you guys were as, guys that were playing baseball that had these like kind of aspirations and like big goals and worked like really hard to get there. And, I remember being, a guy who didn't have that at that time in my life, and being envious of like kind of the goals that you had as like a shared collective group, and also a group that like had accountability for each other's like actions and behaviors, and really trying to like make each other better.
Mm-hmm.
And,
mm-hmm.
That was something I would definitely say like I started out with. There was times in my life like I didn't have that. And then I've like fully regained that, and it's something that I've realized like the level of importance just in general.
I think it was in college where I realized, we had in playing baseball at Pitt, it was six of us in that class that came in. That was when I immediately realized how important your network is.
Yep.
And like, I think it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Like it's amazing how much one person can drag you down.
Yep. Or a group of people can like really lead you astray from your like real values. And sometimes you that happens, and it's like a great reminder of, the fact that like you maybe aren't hanging out with like the right group of people, or your network is kind of lacking, and that's okay, right? Because it's like evolving and getting better and improving. And sometimes that's saying like, hey, these people are not bringing value to me any longer, or haven't at all. And unfortunately, like there's times in life where you just have to like kind of cut that away to make yourself better. And, again, just that was something it just kind of like came to my brain, like that foundation at like a younger age of growing up, like where I did. And then, that friend group kind of set for me like the standard of what I look for in my friend group, now, and I have for a long time. And like those buddies like set the standard, and still today are guys that, they're guys you may not talk to like every day, but if you saw them once a year, and you probably feel this way, like
we see the air of those guys.
Yeah, and but like you immediately
right
back up, and you're like proud of what they're doing, and they're proud of what you're doing, and there's like there's like a mutual respect there and an elevated experience.
It's amazing how you immediately start hyping each other up.
Yep.
Like there's not, oh, well, I saw where you failed. I mean, like, look, we could, like, the amount of times that I've, like, good God, we can't even, if we're having a reunion.
We could fill this podcast if you went with Greg Putnam's failures.
Well, yeah.
We'd be here for a long time.
Like a reunion with friends, anytime you gather with at least in my case, it is always, we're picking each other up. It's like, what have you done? Like, I'm so, dude, that's so proud.
Yeah. And you are proud, and like you're proud of seeing your buddies like with their families and who they've like become, right? And especially when you've known people for like a really long time. And I also think it's important, like when you've known people for a long time, is you also have to be like okay with their growth and change.
Yeah.
And in like a way where you're like, you just seeing them kind of like excel as well, I think is like very encouraging. And then you also want to be somebody that's like at the reunion with interesting things going on. So it encourages you to like maybe like go into some different areas or kind of challenge yourself.
You want to level up.
Exactly. Completely level up.
You don't want to, status quo becomes boring.
It completely. And I think surrounding yourself with like other people who think that way is just so valuable. And it's super contagious,
right.
In the same way that like negativity is contagious, like so is, positivity, and so is that.
I don't know if you've ever had this. I don't know. I think it was probably like 10 years ago or so. I just made the decision that I got to be selfish. And I have to, those guys, I text them all the time. I go back and we're talking about this a little longer than, the other steps that you've gone through. But I think it's so important to discuss this foundational level. And this applies, you got that core group in high school. I got it in college.
Yep.
And it's never gone away. It's like my foundation that I can go back to if I ever needed anything, if I ever need a reminder. But along the way, and I don't know when it happened, but I realized anybody who wasn't a part of that, and like that grows and flexes, they're a disease. It's a virus. And I don't know, it was, I had trouble with it when I thought like, I have to be selfish. I'm willing to put out a ton of value to help somebody else. But if you aren't on board with sharing and value, sharing and advancing, it's an easy decision for me.
Yep.
And it's not personal. Wish you all the best. Similar, do you feel like do you have
completely. And it goes back to, I would say, like whether it's like a business partnership. Like I talk about this a lot with within more like the career space, but if you're in a partnership that doesn't bring like shared value, or I was having a conversation with one of my business partners this morning, like what I would kind of go back to, like in a little bit of like military terms, but like mutually supporting, fire positions where, if you and I are working on the same objective together and you're over on that side and I'm on this side, we need to be working in a way that's like mutually supporting of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes into like your friend group as well. Like if you only take, that only goes so far. Like it has to be kind of reciprocal where it's a partnership. It's good for you. It's good for me. And it's elevating on both. And at the end of the day, like if we meet that objective, like we're both going to be better for it. Not just one of us can win. Right. And I think that carries over just in a lot of areas. And it carries over to yourself where you're like making those decisions of pivot points or what you're going to do next, or kind of like trying to get out of that gray area where you may be like a little bit bogged down is having those mutually supported positions that help you get there, that ultimately makes it good, not just for you, but like something, grander, broader. And if you can make it almost like to where it's, not just good for you, but good for something larger than you, it's far easier to do it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, but you do have to be selfish. And unfortunately, like you have to be like, when you're making those choices, and we'll like probably talk more about this, but like you have to be so committed to like that personal success is that you have to cut away things that don't bring value in. Mm-hmm. And that can make you be a fairly challenging person, like to be around in personal relationships, because a lot of people, and I am a believer in like balance, but I'm not a great practitioner of balance, because when it comes down to
I don't
me,
necessarily believe in balance, to be quite honest. I think it's an overused word.
It's a very overused word. And like everybody's like, oh, you need to balance this and that and the other. But like ultimately, like if you want to be successful at something, there can be no balance, and there can be no there can be no compromise to like what you will do to get there. And unfortunately, that costs like relationships, that costs time, it can cost you money. But when you have that level of commitment and you're like set on doing something, that's what it takes when it gets hard. And that's what it takes to like want to do that job and not just want to like, tell people that you're doing it.
I probably shouldn't have said that. Balance is super important, but I don't, and you've pinnacled in ways that I will never do along that path though, to achieve those big milestones. I mean, you gotta forego balance some.
Completely.
Right? I mean, you gotta like set that aside. It'll come back, hopefully. Yeah. But when you're along that path, I mean, like when you were going through the SEALs and stuff, I mean, like balance had to
there was no balance.
Right.
There was zero balance. There was 100% commitment to that goal and task. And there was basically like a cutting away of anything at that point in time that wasn't directly related to the success of that. And that included like certain people or like,
I couldn't imagine you walking in one morning and being like, hey, look, we've been really going hard. We need to
we're going to take a step back. And no, it was 100%. And through that experience and because I found success like in that space, like I will say this, like I consider myself to be a very like untalented person in general. Like I have very few like actual talents where if you said like, hey Greg, let's step outside and do this for the first time. If it was hitting a baseball, like I was a below average athlete, but I was like a very like above average at like some of the other activities that I've like pursued greatly. But the only reason that I like, and I say like my only true talent is probably like my ability to choose an activity and fully commit to getting good at it. And I might not be very good in the beginning, but I'll be pretty good because of the amount of like
repetitions,
reps and time and effort and commitment that I will put forward at the expense of like failure over and over again to figure out like the system that works for me to be good at the things that I ultimately care about. And then I'm extremely competitive in getting to that space. But from like a starting out perspective, again, like there was nothing where I would be like, oh yeah, this natural talent. But again, my only talent I feel like is the ability to stay in the game and work hard and continue to like get better incrementally over time and do the work and the reps that it takes.
So you were from Philly in high school in Philadelphia, you went to college, West Virginia,
yep.
And then Montana. So like how does that happen?
So I had a cousin that like I basically grew up with and was like kind of having another brother, and he was going to school in Montana, and he's from Alaska originally. I used to go up there and kind of live with them for a summer up there when I was in college and work up there, and that's how I started getting into some of the outdoor guiding space. And Alaska's great because they'll like hire anybody kind of to start with, or maybe maybe not so much anymore, but and like the early 2000s, like
fortunately for you, that's
fortunately they were like, if you want a job, we'll give you one. You can get some experience.
Just come on out.
Yeah, make it up here, and like if you didn't get fired, and and it took a lot to get fired, to be honest. But luckily, like I was able to work up there for a bit, get some experience, and then my cousin always had.
So how long were you in Alaska for?
I spent a summer.
Trip.
Yeah, I would go up there for the full summer and then come back and got some experience, and then I started doing the outdoor guiding stuff in Montana. And because he always had a house here, I was able to come out, during the summer times. And after I graduated from college, I was like, had been doing that. I really enjoyed doing it. I really wanted to be out west, and I had just had some experiences in college that like I, kind of set the trajectory for me, being very like concerned about like how I was using my time and what I was doing with it, and really started to drive my direction of like truly going in areas that like I wanted to go, that I found a ton of like personal value versus what maybe other people found value in. And I honestly, like I was a kid from Pennsylvania that really wanted to work in the outdoor industry in Montana, which was extremely competitive, like at the time, believe it or not. And I remember like the first jobs that I got in Montana, I literally had to walk in and say like, hey, I will work for you for free for a week. But at the end of that week, if you think I did a decent job, like you need to like hire me for some days. And I used to do like week-long backcountry trips for free. And I remember I did one of those and I just worked super hard because it meant that much to me. And I learned a lot. I asked a lot of questions. And, by the end of the week, that not only did they give me a lot of work in the future, but they paid me for that week. And I just started developing this kind of way that works for me, which I've only found through like hard work, literally, and kind of the learning and doing, just working through it and figuring it out and not letting anybody deter you and not letting anybody tell you like, oh, because like you didn't grow up with this or doing this, that was some reason.
So wait, you're not like a third generation guide, cowboy, SEAL.
Not a bit. My uncle is a Navy SEAL, and that's how I like, and we can talk about like kind of how I went there. So my cousin, who I just mentioned, his dad was a Navy SEAL. My mom.
But it's not, you don't like this lineage.
No lineage at all. No.
Hunting, guiding.
No, I started hunting when I was a kid. Like again, like just a number of like fortunate events. Like, my brothers don't hunt. My dad doesn't hunt. I always had this like deep-seated like interest in hunting. I don't know why. And luckily I had a family friend who like saw that and like took interest in my interest and like helped develop me. And I started bow hunting when I was like, I don't know, I was probably like 11 or 12 years old.
Really?
And yeah, and I used to go up to upstate New York, travel hours to go do like
so you love nature. You always love nature.
Yeah, I just love being outside, and like, but I never had anybody there that like made it easy for me, I guess. All these pursuits that I've ever like gone after have been on me to develop. And from a young age, like even the hunting thing, which again, like some of these things like are just kind of like coming to me as we're like talking about this, but like are not on the list anywhere of things I like want to talk about. But this family friend, Charlie Pace, who like probably one of the nicest things anybody's like ever done for me in my life was the fact that he took interest in my interest, and I had nobody else to like teach me. This is before like, Steve Ranella and like all these people that are out there now. Like if you didn't have like a parent or an uncle who hunted, like there was no way to learn.
Well, and you've got like Steve Ranella, you got the Meat Eater channel,
yeah.
You've got like YouTube didn't exist.
Exactly. And so like, luckily for me, this friend who like still today is like a mentor, and like, Charlie and his wife were out here this summer. His kids were just here 2 weeks ago. These are like lifelong friendships, but like Charlie like taught me how to hunt, brought me out like I was like one of his own kids, and developed me and developed the skill set that I needed like help developing. But I also had to do a lot on my own, right? Like when I went up there, I had to be proficient, and that meant like shooting hundreds and hundreds of arrows in my backyard, like on my own accord, right? Like nobody said, Greg, you need to go practice. I wanted to be so good at that skill set for whatever reason. I just would go out there and do it. And it's still something I love to do. And it's still something I do with those guys. But I think, again, that kind of showed me in my life, like nobody's going to do it for you, right? Like if you've got to drive in a direction, you have to make it happen. And you might have some encouragement, and like, it's great. Like if your parents like fostered your like passion in baseball and like what it takes to be successful in those areas. But at some point it comes down to you. Like, and if it's your kids, you want to be doing these like amazing things, like you can't make that happen. Right. You can facilitate the area that they can have success. But at the end of the day, like it comes down to you, but you also need mentors, and you need helpers, and you need people that are going to like facilitate your learning and development. And these are like leaders in business and in life. And I've been so fortunate because I've like had these people that have helped me along the way. And my uncle, for instance, like I remember I was in high school. we went to his Navy SEAL reunion. It was his 20th class reunion. And I remember when I showed up in Virginia Beach, and I weighed like 111 pounds. And I was
perfect.
Like, 5'7", which
just the recruiters were all over.
They couldn't even get enough of me, and I was 18 and like, not a very good student. And I remember seeing these guys and we went to this like demonstration where like, guys were jumping out of planes and shooting stuff. And I remember like there was a sniper hidden in the beach, and like all of a sudden this gunshot goes off, and like you stand up, and the guy stands up, and you're like, and I remember leaving there going like, I'm going to do that one day. Like this is.
So at 18, you started getting that.
I got this seed planted from that weekend. And I remember saying to my uncle, like, I'm going to do that. And
what did he say?
He said, okay, well, that's, going to take a lot of like work. And
did you tell anybody else?
No, I didn't. But in the back of my brain, like it was always there. And it was like this burning thing. And even through college, like there was a lot of times where.
So why didn't you tell anybody else? I'm just curious.
Because I was afraid of what they were probably going to say
right.
about me or to me about like what I wanted to do. And that'll come up again, and even when I was dead set and determined to be a SEAL, I told very few people because I didn't want people I didn't care what people thought, but I also didn't really like care to hear their judgment. And, so as that went on, like even in college, there were times, because like when I went to college, probably like you, like that was right in like the early, 2000s. So you had like 9/11 happen. And
while we were in college,
my dad worked in New York City. Like my neighbor growing, like I knew a lot of people that were like involved in that, and that had definitely like an impact on me as well, because I also had this like seed planted that I really wanted to like serve this country in a capacity, of special operations for whatever reason. Like that just was something I was very like driven towards. It was probably because I saw that and those guys were like super nice to me. And like guys answered my questions, and you're all these like big burly like tattooed dudes, like
man.
These were men, and I was like, holy cow, like that is a group I want to be part of. Like, but again, like I kind of set this like elevated goal for myself, and I was like, that's the fucking group. Like I want to do that,
because I probably met you like that next. You were probably
like the next
19 or 20, and you were skinny.
Super skinny.
You got bigger though through college.
I did, because I started to have this, again, like I started to think of how I was going to do this thing.
Transition.
There was times like during my college where I actually had very serious considerations about not completing it and joining the military at that time. Completely good on them, and like the right advice that paid off to be very good. My parents were like, listen, you started this thing, you need to see it through. And when you're done, like whatever you want to do from there is on you. But like you need to kind of start this thing that you finish what you started.
Yeah.
And so, but this, if you remember at the time, like this is when like Afghanistan was going on and Iraq was starting, and like the wars were there. And so like when you signed up for the military at that time, there was no guessing of what you were getting, especially if you went into one of these like special operations groups. And I just say at the time, like when we first met, like I was, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had some like goals, but they weren't like school related goals. I didn't feel like I was bringing like a ton of value like at the time.
Right.
But I started to get committed to this idea and there was a lot of time where I was like, ooh, I do want to do this, so I better get ready, right?
Yeah.
And I saw this goal as like so lofty that I knew the preparation was going to take, kind of a long time. But I started working towards it, and I did start getting in shape, and I started like surrounding myself with people that, and in that time I was also doing this outdoor guiding thing, which was also like a very physical, like outdoor job. And that kind of layered in on like just spending a ton of time outside and kind of being like uncomfortable, then getting uncomfortable, being uncomfortable. And again, I'd always been a kid who like spent a ton of time outside, but I really started getting serious about it. And the guiding thing was actually going like really well. And so I knew kind of in the back of my mind that this Navy thing, like it wouldn't go away. Like it just kept coming up in my brain. Like I want to, it was just there. And I started guiding full time with the intent of maybe doing it for like another year or so. I ended up doing it for 3. Probably because it was going really well, and I had some like really unique opportunities within that space. But I'm also a big believer that like you should kind of leave things when they're like going well and not like to where like you have to leave, right?
Leave on a high instead of wearing out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I kind of got to the point, but I was 20, and there's an age cap on the Navy and it's 28. And so
to enlist.
Exactly. You had to be below 28. And I was getting to the point where I wasn't, quite there, but I was getting there though. I was 25 at the time where I really got serious. And I had like an injury I had to work through. And, so I was kind of like testing the waters on that as far as like how I was going to do. Because the last thing I wanted to do was like get in the Navy and have an issue come up that kept me from my like goal of being a SEAL. But at the time, my current wife, and I were, we were together and we were dating and we sat down and I never forget like the restaurant we were at. And I, in a very serious way, I was like, I want to do this. And we had moved from Pennsylvania, made a big move to Montana and Idaho, and things were going great there. And that was a big move, right? It was a big shift. And she took like a total plunge to like come along with me and like completely supported, my dream of like, of working like in this space. And again, it was just something I loved to do. And I loved like teaching people about it. And I loved being out there like every day. And I don't know why, it was just like something inside of me I like really wanted to do on my like list of things, right? And I committed to doing it.
What did she say when you told her that?
About wanting to do the Navy?
Yeah.
Oh, it
scared, nervous.
Yeah. It took, it took, hey, 3 years ago you wanted to do this and we're doing this and it's going really well. And I remember thinking to her and talking about it with her and like where we kind of wanted to go like with our lives at the time, was that I felt like I needed kind of like a bump of into like another level that would kind of position us better long term. And guiding was great, but like it was one of those things you could only do it as many physical days as you could do was kind of the window or the ceiling, I guess. And so, again, I put in a lot of time and effort to kind of like, and the thought never went away. So I started reading like all the books, and I not only did I read Navy books, so I read like every military book I could like get my hands on. And I wanted to make sure like the group in the direction I was going to was like in all military units, and especially special operations, in my opinion, have like their own community and kind of vibe. Yeah. And you kind of know if you like, it's like being in the locker room. Like you kind of know when you're like on the right team where you're like, oh, these are kind of my people. And
they're jag-offs, you're cool.
And completely. Yeah. And you're like, but and like everybody's cool in their own right. But like every unit has their own like kind of vibe. And people give SEAL team guys like a ton of shit, right? Because we have awesome hair and we, we're handsome and we do wild things and people love it. And then like other groups,
that's why I was never the SEALs.
Yeah, other groups that I won't mention them, maybe they're bald and, not as cool, but I'm just kidding. Everybody's great. But anyway, the more I kept like learning and reading, I just kept coming back to the SEALs. And
so you were just interested in the military.
I was.
I wanted sure.
Yes, I wanted to make I was very interested in the SEALs, obviously, because of my like experience I talked about before, but I wanted to make sure the group that I like chose was the right fit. So, I read every I wanted to be in special operations because I just felt like I wanted to challenge myself and elevate, and that really at the end of the day, I wanted to be an elite soldier. I wanted to do that job. I was prepared to do whatever it took to do that job. I wanted to serve my country like at that capacity. And I just kept coming back to the SEAL teams and to like what that was going to look like. And again, I had, a lot of people, kind of as I got more committed and I started kind of telling some people, yeah, this is what I was going to do. I started going to the recruiter. I started formulating the plan of action to do it. And I remember so many people were like, well, you're not a world-class athlete. You have no gold medals.
Who was saying that? Was it was it Navy?
No.
Or was it just like the casual person?
It was your casual people. It was the guy at the gym who was asking you maybe like what you were training for. And a lot of those people love to tell you like what you can and can't do, like according to them. And the funniest thing about most of those people is like they had never done it, right? And I remember my brother.
They had no idea what you were going to do.
Exactly.
But they were going to give you your opinion.
But they were going to give you a negative opinion of what they thought you were capable of, maybe based on like your past, your size, your previous experiences, and they were going to project onto you like what your level of success.
So that is exactly what we were just talking about. We're initially talking about, right? Like the core foundational group of people who are here to support you. Let's get better together. And then these viruses.
Yes.
And like people who are just, if you would have told me before you're a SEAL, you're going to be a SEAL, I would have been taken away. But I mean, like, let's do it. Like that's not like, I would have been taken away. But I can't fathom when people tell me what I can't do.
Yep.
First, I can't understand why they would ever say such a thing.
Yeah.
What's the value in saying that? And I immediately, you've told me everything I need to know about you, right? Because you are scared of my success.
Exactly. And the value is to them is that they don't actually have to confront. They're like, the more losers they surround themselves with, the better they feel. And they don't want to see you out there doing that.
Because if a Navy SEAL is in their circle.
Yeah. Or what about...
How can he swim in that circle when you're there?
Yep. And if he doesn't want to elevate his game, like how does he... but again, and a lot of these people are not like even in your friend group. They're just these like kind of naysayers that have never really like done much with themselves, but they feel far better about themselves, because again, like ultimately they're a loser and they want to be like surrounded with other losers. And they'd rather you be like, oh, you're right. I only do weigh 165 pounds and I'm 5'7". I could never be a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
And my brother had this buddy who was actually a Navy SEAL. And I remember I called him up and I was like super nervous. And I called him up and I was like, yeah, like, I really want to be a SEAL. And he was like, you can totally be a Navy SEAL. And I was like, what? And he was like, I did it. And he's like, here's my background. And his background sounded just like me. And you know who else's background sounded just like me? Every one of my buddies, with a few exceptions of like some star performing athletes and just some exceptional people. But the majority of guys that make it through, Bozeman or in the SEAL teams are just like your normal guys who have like a very like, high aptitude to like want to do, that job or like fulfill that, but all those people also like don't want to just do it so they can tell people that like that is their job and then like sound cool.
I found out you were SEAL, I think after you retired.
Yeah.
I think it was like a reunion. I was with Zambrisky. I was Mike.
Yeah.
And I asked him about you because I think I was looking to come out here with my dad and brother to do a trip. And I was like, is he still guiding?
Yeah.
I was like, dude, he retired from the Navy.
Yeah.
Like,
so I didn't retire. I got to 10 years and then I chose to get out and I can talk through that. So no difference. It's just a verbiage thing. But like retirement would be like you get to 20, you're medically retired or separated from the Navy.
Yes,
Yeah. And just so people listening are clear, but yes, when I got to the point where, you come up for these enlistment time frames that are like certain blocks of time.
You mean you don't have like a social media like network where you're out there like blasting you don't have like a Navy SEAL t-shirt.
Yeah. So,
or bumper sticker.
You have you'll have like 4-year blocks and you re-sign up your contract with the Navy. And then once you've signed those, you're like there for the next, amount of time. And, my wife and I can kind of talk through this more, but back to kind of how I got there, like this guy totally encouraged me. And then when you sign that paperwork that you're going to do it, you don't sign up to be a Navy SEAL. You sign up to be in the Navy. And if you make it through training, you get to be a Navy SEAL. And if you don't, you get to be in the Navy. And it's very different. And like, depending on what you're like, and there's nothing against like what the folks in the Navy do every day is like amazing. And a ton of those jobs, like I would not want to do. But I really wanted to be a SEAL. But first, and I tell people this all the time, like first you are committing to being in the U.S. military, U.S. Navy, and then if you are fortunate enough and you're lucky enough to be a SEAL, you get to go work at that command, and then you have to like basically earn that. I mean, I know guys that were Navy SEALs that like are no longer Navy SEAls, but still in the Navy. And, I was fortunate enough for 10 years to get to like work there and truly like get to do a job that I had wanted to do. So like the process of getting there and the commitment it takes over a long period of time to like stay the course. But again, I was like committed to like, I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to do that job. And ultimately like I wanted to help like better America. And whether that was like other soldiers or other people, I wanted to make a difference in some capacity, in a small capacity, or I guess I should say, I wanted to be part of something that was making a difference.
Yeah, it's more than, I feel like it's more than that though. As we talk, and I know you haven't talked in years, but you're also super driven. Like you want the good to come out of it, but like I couldn't imagine you not going to be this like elite soldier.
You have to be so driven though, because like even along the path of that, like you have buddies that like friends of yours. So you're like, which actually is interesting. Back to like the friend thing for a second. Like all of my buddies from like boot camp, almost to a man, made it through buds. And this was like my little like group of buddies. There was like 5 of us. Yeah. We all met. We never met before. Yeah. Still great friends of mine today. But we all made it, right? And then there was other groups where like the main guy, like the main buddy that they all looked up to quit, and then all of them quit. So you had to be on this very like personal path, but you also had to be on this very like team oriented path where like it had to be more about kind of like not wanting to let your buddies down or like other people in your life. Like I kind of put myself in a tight spot intentionally. Number one, I convinced my, fiance, my wife now, but my fiance at the time that we were going to go do this. Like I could not come home and be like, I quit. That was not.
So where were you going to do this? So where did you guys?
So we left Montana and Idaho, and we go to San Diego. My wife drives to San Diego, gets an apartment. I've never been to San Diego up until this time. I go to Spokane, Washington, where I get on an airplane and go to Great Lakes, Illinois, and I spend 8 weeks at Navy boot camp.
And she's in San Diego.
She's in San Diego, and then I come down and report down in San Diego for SEAL training or buds, and and get started with that process. And so she went down and we made that big shift to do that. And I also remember like at the time you had to pick another job as like your foundation job. And I remember asking the recruiter, like, what's the worst job? I can't remember what it was, but some like terrible job. And he's like, you do not want that job. And I was like, that's the job I'm taking. Because like I wanted no outs, right? Like, I wanted no time in my brain, the thought of like, oh, this could be better. I don't want, and I gave up a lot to be there. And I think that's also important. Like when you leave something that kind of like a high note, you also are giving up a lot and you know what you're giving up. So it makes what you're trying to do next that much more like critical. But yeah, you have to be so driven. Like, I mean, the funny thing about that training pipeline, it's not one thing that gets you. It's like the culmination of day after day, week after week, month after month, that finally adds up and like breaks your body or breaks your spirit, right? But that's life. Like life isn't one catastrophic moment that like ends your dream. It's these small incremental failures that you let kind of like pile up and they finally become like overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And I'd watch people literally give up the same dream that I had because they stopped running because they convinced themselves they couldn't do it. And all they had to run was like 50 yards farther and it was over. Mm-hmm. And they quit. And the guys who didn't kept going, right? And that sometimes was just a matter of like, telling yourself you could only go. Sometimes it was like you could try to get to lunch. Sometimes it was like, I just got to get through the next 10 minutes. And sometimes it was like, I know I got it. This week's going great. I can make it through this week. And it wasn't always perfect. There's huge setbacks. There's failures. The one thing you learn there, though, is that like you literally never really win. Even when you win, you're kind of losing. Like there's some sort of punishment along the way. It's less than if you like lost. But it teaches you like if you keep going, you'll probably get there. And if you develop the attitude of like, whatever it takes and however it takes to go like around, under, over. And when you're with other people that have that same mentality, like it's super, it rubs off on you in such a way that it becomes like ingrained in the way you do things for the rest of your life. And it's all that is though. It's just like, it's really good driven people that you're like watching and you're like, man, look at the commitment that guy has. Look at this guy who like, practices this one skill over and over and over until they're like so good at it. But it's all like that, I'd say 99% of that community is guys like that. And all of a sudden it like to play in that space, you have to develop that level of commitment. And, I do think that's where and sometimes like in a way where it negatively affects other areas in your life, you cannot have balance.
Yeah.
You are just like, this is the goal. This is what I'm doing. And that's brought friction for me because I have a hard time not doing that.
Right.
And I have a hard time, saying like, hey, I'm going to take a break or whatever the case may be. And the SEAL teams was like an amazing opportunity, an amazing experience to see the world and like appreciate, what we have here in America, and also do some things where, I felt like I was a very small part of like moving the ball forward. And that feeling also kind of becomes contagious where you like want to feel like you're involved in the planet and in the world, in the country and in your like space on doing something that like leaves more value behind,
I find it fascinating that you said you left Montana at, you were on a positive trajectory, and it's leaving on that trajectory. If you're looking at this, if you pie chart life, right? Like, yep. Or whatever the hell that chart would be called. I'm not smart.
Yeah, the graph.
The graph.
Yeah.
As you graph pie charts, as you graph life, right? Yep. Like Montana, going well, perfect time to cut it, come back down, lose.
And keep in mind, it was my dream to move to Montana, be a fly fishing guide, outdoor guide, ski, all these things. It was my dream, like from a kid. Like I was something I wanted to do since I knew that was an actual thing that you could like get paid for. And I convinced my wife to move out there too. And I made it happen, right? And I made it happen literally with walking into places that were like, okay, like if you want an opportunity, and I remember like
you were literally like you were walking
into fly shops, into outfitters, introducing myself the previous winter, saying like, here's the experience. And I used to, poor Heidi, my wife, used to have to be my like guinea pig in the guide boat as I learned like how to guide. And we would go out when it was snowing and raining and windy, and like she would fish for me and help me. And I guess that's a huge thing too. Thinking about it now, like the support that you get from other people encouraging you to pursue your dreams often means that they have to give up like a part of their dream to some capacity. And that's also challenging because if you're like kind of a dominating person like in that area, you almost need somebody that helps you do that. And they give up a lot like along the way to do that for you. And it's really hard to find like a partner in life and in friends who like are willing to do that.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No, left. She had a great job, and speaking of like gray area and transitional points, like she had an awesome job in San Diego that she loved. And when I got done with training, the first orders that we got were to Hawaii. We both had no plans, and it was super last minute. We were supposed to stay in San Diego, and I was going to go to a SEAL team there. And in that last, like, we had some guys in my class that like failed some evolutions, and they needed guys to go to this team in Hawaii, and needs of the Navy came up before the needs of the Putnams, and I got orders to Hawaii. And and Heidi had to make a huge change. She had to change jobs, and she had to meet new people, and she was like, she didn't want to leave what she was doing, and then we did, and she had to do all those things to kind of like restart herself, and she built like an amazing network and new career, and but those shifts are hard, and again, I want to read it, like as that trajectory in Montana went up, we loved what we were doing, we loved where we were at, we had a great friend group, and then here I come with like this completely new thing, completely different, and we also kind of knew what we were asking for as far as like what that job could possibly entail. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize it at the time, but I remember like in the very beginning stages, like they basically say to you, like you will have friends in your class that get killed doing this job. Yeah. You will get friends that are sitting in this building with you like today that are going to get killed in training. Right. And you have to be okay, with that. And, but still now, making that change at that point, like, and kind of restarting over. And again, I kind of had everything I'd asked for, right? And
what do you think it's because of like the comfort? Were you getting too comfortable?
I wasn't getting comfortable.
Or was it just not what you?
It wasn't. The struggle of making it happen was gone, and there wasn't much more struggle left. Like, I did it, and I was doing it, and I was kind of doing it at like, in my opinion, like I was doing it in a very like challenging like market where it was very competitive, and the places I was working were very competitive to just book that many days. But I could have kept doing it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and I could have stayed kind of like, there wasn't much more progression, I guess. There's guys who probably like, I was pretty good at that job. And there's guys now that like are a million times better. And there was guys that were a million times better, I'm sure, at the time. But I was kind of just to the point where I just didn't feel like there was like I felt like I kind of got to do it. And that's when I was like, time to change.
You practice. You were on the boat in the rain. You were working. You went door to door. You achieved it.
Yeah.
Now like you achieved it in that you got the job.
I did. And
you were working.
Yeah. And it was probably like if you, again, like you kind of get to a certain point and you're like, wow, that's awesome. I did it.
But the grind is gone.
The struggle of knowing if it was going to work or not was gone. And maybe that happened with me. There were some things in the Navy that like I really wanted to do that just like those doors kind of closed for a number of like kind of professional reasons. And maybe that got to that point a little bit too, where I was like, I got to do this. I got to do this at like what I would consider to be some of like the highest levels. And I could have, my career there was going fantastic. And I could have, I could still be doing that now. Yeah. But I kind of got to the point where like I had other things though, like we had 3 kids in the process. And, my desire and like my like, for whatever reason, like I love the Western United States. I love the mountains. I love like the lifestyle. And I just love those things. And I wanted my kids to grow up like doing those things. I didn't want them to like come into those things at kind of a mid-age. And my wife and I used to joke, like when we would go skiing before we had kids and we'd see these like little tiny kids, and we were like, that's what we want our kids to look like. But your kids not gonna look like that if we start skiing.
No. So like I asked you like about an hour or two ago. I'm like, didn't I just see your girls just bouncing on a cow?
Yeah. There was a sheep. But yeah. They were mutton busting. But that's what we wanted, right? We wanted our like kids.
So explain what mutton busting is.
Mutton busting is for folks who don't live out west. That's when you put your 4 to 7-year-old on, like a sheep, but these aren't like pet sheep. They're kind of like wild. They're domesticated.
They just like hold on?
Yeah. They wrap their arms around their bottom, their legs, and then they're at the rodeo and they're in the same chutes where like the horses and the bulls and stuff come out. And they open the chute and the sheep comes running out as fast as it can because it doesn't want this kid hanging on it. And the kid tries to hang on for 6 seconds, just like a rodeo. And then usually they've
got safety gear.
They wear a helmet and stuff, but they fall off. They get kind of like,
it's the coolest thing to watch.
I saw a video.
I'm like, a sheep isn't going to be bouncing me around. Yeah. Like, that'd be awesome.
But a little kid, and like they go to, and like my buddy's daughter won the mutton busting at this like huge rodeo. So there's like thousands of people, and they usually like start the rodeo with it. And so like my buddy's daughter, like she literally grabbed on the sheep and like rode it till it basically just like stopped, and she jumped off and she won this like huge belt buckle. But it's still like an out west thing, it's like the county fairs, the rodeos, and like we wanted our kids to be able to do that if they wanted to.
That lifestyle.
Yeah. And like that's a lifestyle thing that at some point you just like, you don't get it back. Right.
Yeah.
And that has been a driving factor to me in my life too, where like there's certain decisions, like if I hadn't chose to do the Navy when I did, like the door would have potentially closed because there was like a hard stop.
Imagine today.
Yeah.
Had you not done it.
And I have no idea where my life would be if I hadn't, because I didn't really have, and I still don't have this great set plan of like my ultimate like destination. I just get these things where I'm like, I want to do this.
Had you not, I couldn't imagine you'd be if you regret it, you'd be miserable that you hadn't done it.
I can't imagine what the feeling of regret would feel like in not trying, and I can't imagine what the feeling of regret would feel like in quitting. And I knew that that was something, and that is the single biggest life-changing experience that I've had in my almost 40 years on this planet, was the 10 years that I spent as a Navy SEAL, for like what I learned about myself, what I learned about what other people are capable of, what I learned about like the mental component of any performance. I don't care what it is, in what that plays. And I also learned, when you bet and take risk on yourself, what kind of personal reward you could get back. And you and I would not be sitting here today if the same person that you met when I was in college, like, continued on that trajectory and didn't start to really press their foot on the gas of life to like get everything you can, because like you get one time here and it's short, and you better be doing the stuff that like charges you up, because nobody's going to do it for you. And there becomes a certain time where those like things are not going to be available to you. And that is something that I learned, I learned it the hard way through losing friends and through people. And some of these people were like some of the brightest fuses I know, like, not to sound corny, but like literally like burned out the fastest. And it teaches you how quick and how fast it can change and go away. And when I have had times where I wasn't challenging myself or didn't feel like I was bringing what I would consider to be more like full value, it really bothered me inside. Like, I kept having this recurring, I don't know if you would call it like a nightmare, because it wasn't happening at night, but like I had this recurring vision that one friend of mine would like walk through the door and see me, what I felt like at the time was not kind of maximizing my potential, and how let down they would be. And they didn't have any more potential, like all theirs got used up. And it really bothered me when I thought about like how finite the time on this planet is, and how short it can be, and how you can go from, thriving to gone. Yeah. And everything you've done up until that point is like what you get to do. So you better do the stuff that's valuable and important to you, because you never want to look back. Another person told me this story. He was an older person, but was talking about their dad. And when they died, he basically was like sobbing on his deathbed because he didn't feel like he had maximized like his time on this planet. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And like, I do not want that to be me. And I do not want to be crying about the things I didn't try and didn't do. I want to be saying I at least gave it a go, and all the things that kind of like drove me.
And I failed.
Yeah. And if you do fail, like, how are you going to change course? And I failed a million times along the way, but those failures have ultimately like not stopped me. They've driven me, and maybe those failures have taught me, like, I thought I worked really hard at that and I was short. I came up short. I got to work harder next time. Yeah. And unfortunately, that only reinforces then like the drive to do these things that like are challenging but have value. And again, it almost puts things and can easily put things like out of balance, because the sting of falling short, and it ultimately comes down to you. Mm-hmm. And you are the one that like didn't do what it takes. And sometimes doors just close, right? But if you want it bad enough, like, you'll find a way to open it again, or another door opens, or, so I just think there's like so much like value in when you think about, like, everybody feels like they've got like all this time, or they'll do it tomorrow. Right. And my life lessons have taught me that like, that's not always the case. And I've had those moments where I didn't feel like I was maximizing, and like the way that those made me feel made me never want to have those moments again. Right. And that was after being in the Navy. Like that transition out can be challenging, because you go from this like very like fast-paced, purpose-driven. I knew at that time like we wanted to be back in Montana, Idaho, out west area, but I didn't know what that was going to look like, or even like how we were going to do it. And when we made that massive change, Sometimes it's not, you don't get your dream or your goal easily, right? Like it doesn't happen right away. It happens through figuring it out. You got to set the like track towards success, but that might mean that you got to work at some boring job that you don't like for a certain amount of time as you're preparing the tracks, you're gaining experience. Like I had a guy once call it the, what's your like 5 to 9 job, right?
Yeah.
What's the driving thing that you're doing that's like that's for great. You?
Right.
And sometimes you gotta go to the 9 to 5 and you gotta come home and do the 5 to 9.
Right.
And I remember there was times when I got out of the Navy that like the amount of time that I spent just like networking with people and trying to develop opportunities and, trying new things and figuring out was like another full-time job. And it was hard because I had a full-time job and I was also like, we had just moved and, we were doing all these things, but that I've had those moments. Like my life is not something that's just like one bounce to success. Like I've had the moments that remind me how important it is and why it's important to have conversations like this and encourage other people that like, it can always get better. It can get worse if you let it. Mm-hmm. But if you've got, things that you want to do, it takes trying to do them to make them happen. Right.
Yeah. I mean, so let's transition to Little Bill.
Yeah.
But let's first recognize though, that when you were in college, I'm not going to say you were comfortable, right? So you got in this gray area where you wanted to make a transition. You wanted to do something, so you got uncomfortable.
Yep.
You taught yourself how to guide. You were going door to door. And then we can transition that back to comfort, right? Yep. Like I truly, and this is, I did agree, and this is just my theory, but we can transition that back to comfort. And, once you got past all that struggle, that work, you probably sound like you started getting comfortable again. Like you're guiding.
Yep.
Then, but you've already had that itch, right? The military, the Navy, you're in this gray area.
And I guess that's something just to like mention. I think where you have these like burning things where that like internal voice in your like brain is like continues to say like, for me, it was like the SEAL team thing. It was always there. It would maybe go away for a little bit, but then it would always come back.
So you were in a gray area essentially for a long time.
Yeah, and
it feels.
Yeah, well, like
it was festering.
It was festering since I was like 18 to 26.
Pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, but I had a job then. I remember the last job I worked. Like I was like, probably not like the greatest employee because I was so focused on my success like in the SEAL team. So all I did was like I would go to work and I would just like train and I would leave for like lunch for like, and I'm not recommending this, but I'd like take a 2-hour lunch and I would go train. And I lived in a place at the time like there was mountains and lakes and I would go and I would train for that goal. And I was so focused on that when I kind of got there to do it. And I was like, I knew I'd put in the time, right, to like get ready. But yeah, there was like this long gray time before I actually took the jump and the commitment personally and started preparing myself. But then you sign the paper.
And then everybody gets uncomfortable again.
Exactly. And then
you and your wife moved to San Diego.
Yep.
Extremely uncomfortable again. 10 years later.
Yeah. And everybody knows that like everybody can like read books or watch YouTube or watch the movies or whatever, listen to other podcasts.
Yeah, physically uncomfortable.
Like Buds is about as uncomfortable as as it could get at times.
Right.
If you love being like wet, sandy, cold, and chafed and but it was great. Like I loved Buds. Like I would do Buds if a bus pulled up this morning and said, you got to go to Buds today and at 40 and in my current physical condition, or you got to go to boot camp, I'd be like, send me to Buds immediately. Because it was such a like valuable experience, but it's a high level of discomfort and struggle, and you don't know if you're going to make it,
right? And
you don't know what it's going to look like, and when you're doing that job, I mean, there's times you're challenging yourself, and you're always like, and you're up against like there's limited seats for certain operations, and you're like competing for those seats. And again, I had an awesome time, and like when I left there, I felt like it was something I was doing still like very well, but I also had other goals and I also had done it. And I'm like somebody who wants to have like multiple rungs on my ladder. I don't know what the top one will be. But I wanted guiding to be one. And that was a voice that was inside me going like, this is something I wanted to do. And it kept coming up. Then the SEAL thing. And then kind of now what I'm doing. And something I would recommend is like that voice is there for a reason. And that internal like feeling of like, this is what I should be doing. I don't know why it's there, but it's there. And at some point, my advice would be to listen to that in a way that's like functional for you, because that is where I have found I'm a firm believer, like you're never going to be great at something that you don't like truly love to do. And there's a reason that those voices are like telling you like, go in this direction, go in this direction, go in this direction. And if you listen, you give your opportunity, like yourself, the opportunity to be great versus like, oh, I'll just take this promotion or this raise, or like, oh, if I'll do this for 10 more years and then I'll get paid this and then I'll be able to do these things. And like, yeah, you might, but you might not. And the problem a lot of people get into is that like recurring like theme of like, if I only do these things, I make these sacrifices, eventually I'll get there. Where I'm kind of like, I think you should start going there sooner, because like, I'd rather try and not have it work than wait. And there's never going to be a perfect time. It wasn't a perfect time to move to Montana. It wasn't a perfect time to leave Montana. There wasn't a perfect time to get out of the Navy. There's just time. And you have to make those decisions. And you have to be like running in a direction that you feel like is going to make you in an area where you feel like you can be great. Because that's all, like, we all want to be great at our jobs and in our families and with our friends. But like, if you're not doing stuff that like really motivates you, like you'll be good, but you're never going to be great, you know? And
you probably won't even keep at it.
You won't, because it doesn't mean anything.
If it doesn't have a passion. I mean, or you become one of the people who are sitting in a cubicle and hate your life.
Yeah.
Which to me, that terrifies me. That terrifies me.
About as frightening for me as it gets. And I've spent time like underwater in a little tiny submersible full of water in the pitch black where you can't move a muscle for hours on end. And like, if you don't like being claustrophobic or you don't like being underwater, it is not fun and it is terrifying. I would rather do that all day long than like sit in a cubicle waiting for the clock to hit a certain time so that I can go home
and bitch and moan the whole time while you were sitting there and then go home and do it again.
Yeah, and I get it. Everybody like has their things, and believe me, I've had to like do my fair share of things that like I didn't want to do. Wow, but I was always working towards like what the voice was telling me, and I can't tell you that it's always been right, but there's a reason. And like, I think you have to also be somebody that like hears that and can envision. One of the things I learned in the SEAL teams, which I think was like awesome, was the human performance component and the mental performance component. Like, if you visualize yourself winning and you see yourself like doing these things, like your chances of doing them are far greater, and you're actually like tricking yourself. And the more you tell yourself you can do it, the more you can. And that, like, I don't care if you gotta like whatever you want to call it, like fake it till you make it, lie, tell yourself the lie until it becomes true.
Or fake it until it's big.
But like these people used to teach you these things. Like if you're going into like super high stress sports performance, or
that's what they visualize.
Yeah,
visualization is everything.
Visualize yourself doing the activity in a way that you see yourself, and visualize what it looks like in what a win looks like. And I still do that. And the more you see yourself and convince yourself you can, like, and once you start, all the fear of the gray area of like, what if it doesn't work out? All the fear goes away with the action of doing. The leap. And like, it doesn't have to be the leap headfirst into the deep end. It might be like, I'm going to go swim a couple laps in the shallow end, but it's a step towards the leap. Yeah. And once you do the leap, in my opinion, the fear of like the fall goes away because you're doing it now. And now the next thing comes in is like, are the people who told you weren't going to be successful? Are the teachers who told you that you were too stupid? Are the coaches who told you that you weren't big enough, strong enough, good enough? The people who determined that because of where you started is where you are going to finish, are they going to be right, or are you going to be right? And I can be
and it's our choice.
Yeah. And I can be one stubborn bastard when it comes to convincing other people that they're wrong about me. And that is, and
The
in
lengths
me,
you'll go.
yeah, and if you tell me I can't and it's something I want, stand by, because you've only just thrown fuel on the fire. And every minute that I'm doing it, I'm thinking about you, and I'm thinking about what you told me and why you think it's not for me, and I'm not gonna let you be right.
I ran my first marathon. I was 270 pounds. I'm 6'6".
Yeah.
I was 270, and somebody told me I couldn't run a marathon.
Yep.
And then instead of like getting in shape and like losing weight, I'm like, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
Watch.
Yep.
So they had the Clydesdale division, they call it, which is for big people.
Sure.
It's at 200 pounds. I was 270.
Yeah, that's a big.
So but you have to weigh in. You physically have to weigh in to qualify for it. And I weigh in, and I asked the girl, I was like jokingly, and I was like, "So do I qualify?" And she's like, "You're not doing it." This is the registration the day before the marathon.
Sure.
I go out mile 8. They had just blacktop the entire, like most of the path. I'm like, what with the road? Like, what are you doing? And it was hot as hell. And mile 8, I had like a heat. I don't know, tournament, but heat exhaustion, heat stroke. I mean, medics were trying to take me off. I'm like carrying ice on me for the next 18 miles.
Yep.
And all I kept hearing was her telling me, laughing at me.
Yep.
I'm like, I will die.
Yep.
I will fall. I will fall down on this road. And ironically, I didn't actually think about it just now, but when I crossed the finish line, 2 young girls, maybe one of them, were talking about, I mean, I was like, it took me like 6 hours to do this. It took me forever to do this.
Yeah.
Because I was dying. I mean, I was like walking half it. I couldn't, but I was not going to quit.
Yeah.
And I cross the finish line, and I bend over, and I'm ready to keel over, and nobody comes to my attention.
Yeah.
A blind guy with his guide dog had just passed me, and I'm like, this is... And shout out to, like, blind guys. Dogs, they can, like, kick some ass. I've seen them, like,
Yeah.
I'm bending over, and I hear them talking about what they're doing tonight for, like, their party. And I'm like, this is how I'm going to die.
Yeah. I'm going to die listening to this. But I'm not going to die at the expense of that person knowing that they told me, like, it wasn't for me or to do it.
Not going to happen.
Yeah. But, but that, I think people let that go, like, 2 ways. Like, people internalize that and go, like, yeah, they're probably right. But, like, at some point, you have to be like, no, fuck you. Like,
she was right in that I shouldn't.
Completely.
I probably should not have done that. I should not have done that.
Yeah, but she was wrong in that you couldn't.
I couldn't. And it's like, and my wife, I love her to death. And she's never told me I can't do it.
Sure.
She used to.
Yeah.
And she knows it's
probably a bad thing to say.
But now she's like, Don, should you?
Should you? Yeah.
And that hits home a little more
Completely.
Than could you?
Because it's a far more reasonable thing. Like, should I do this?
Do you need your needs?
Yeah, exactly. And that comes back to, like, life and stuff, right? Like, could you, I don't know. Like, could I try out for the NBA? I mean, I could. Should I? No.
Right.
Like, there's no, and you have to realize, like, there are certain things that, like, I know aren't for me, but the things that I know are, and the things that, like, I really know are, like, in my heart of hearts, I'm not going to let anybody deter me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's the people that you, like, think are supportive. And again, like we talked about in the beginning there, like, until you start doing some of these things that make them feel like maybe they're not, you'd be surprised at, like, who ends up supporting you truly and who are the people you thought were going to that don't. And then you be blown away by the true people that really step up and, like, facilitate your learning in whatever that direction is and help develop you and really truly want to see you do well. And recognizing those people and their, like, importance in that, like, kind of taking the leap, and those people that have done it, right? Like, when you find somebody who's like, I ran a marathon when I was, like, way too heavy and it was terrible, but it got me started on this.
Yeah, I mean, when I said I would never do it again.
Yeah.
And a week later, I'm like, yeah, I can't go out like that.
Yeah.
I can't. I got to.
But what do you think that factor was for you that, like, made you personally?
So I did the marathon, right? Like, that was it. That's the goal. I finished that line. But then afterwards, I felt defeated. Like I had done it, but I hadn't done it because it beat me.
You hadn't done it as well as you know you probably could have.
And it beat me.
Yeah.
I felt defeated.
Sure.
And so 2 years later, I did it again. Crossed the finish line. Different marathon, but I mean, still tough. And I crossed the finish line.
Like, how fast did you
Sun was there. I think I cut off like an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, like I actually ran it.
Yeah.
I was lighter, trained.
Sure.
So now it's like my wife realizes like can't is not a word that we're going to do. If she feels that I shouldn't or might not be able to, she's now with me to help me. Like, let's do this.
And
let's do this together.
But the preparation you put in for the second one, right, is also what happens kind of in that like gray space where you're preparing yourself to make the leap to be successful. To just make the leap, if you're not prepared, like there's a great saying. It's like, what is it? It's like a dream without a plan is a nightmare, and like a plan, without a dream, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But like you have to have the plan, in place to get to the point. And maybe that's savings, right? You're like, hey, I want to try this new thing. I want to try this new job. I want to start my own business. Okay, I've got to save X amount of money.
Reverse engineer.
Exactly. And say like, I'm going to save X amount of money. And so I have this cushion for my family. So we're not going to like go into this huge state of poverty while I pursue this thing. And that also gives you but that preparation then gives you like the confidence. And then when the time is ready and like the gun goes off the second time, you're probably like, oh man, I can't wait. Like this is.
The risk can't be so great that the reward, the risk is going to destroy your reward.
Exactly.
And that's what happened to me that first time.
Yeah.
Like the risk was it was too great. I should have backed off, done what I did the second time.
Yeah.
Prepared.
But that's how you learn nothing teaches you like the humiliation and sting of like the pain that you put yourself into of not being prepared. And that could be like physically, financially, I don't know. It could be if there's a million things, right? Like, I don't know. There's a million things. Do you think though that you got that through like, obviously like playing sports in college is like a high level of sports. Do you think you got that like mindset or just that, that like feeling of not like, some people would finish it and be like, I did it. That was great. And they go to work and tell everybody that, but you were like, I can do that better.
Well, I don't know. I don't really care about. It was that I said I'll never do it again. It was that I even though I did it.
Yeah.
I mentally, I didn't do it.
You knew you had more in you.
I accepted that running it with like ice all over myself, like borderline, feeling like I'm dying, like. And then saying, I'll never do it again because I was so bad.
Sure.
That in itself, I had to do it again.
Sure.
Like, it broke me.
Yeah. And I think that is like that is where people like who kind of find that, right? It's like, how can I do it better? Okay, I'm doing it. Like, I'm doing life. It's all fine. But how can I do it better? How can I get everything like out of it? How can I like really like set that positive example, like whether it's for like your kids or your friends? And I think like feeling that and doing something about it, again, like it's all on us, right? Like we all have the power to make like whatever kind of changes we want. But you have to like recognize it and then you have to do it. And the doing is the hard part. And coming back from that, right?
Well, for me, it wasn't even, so doing it was preparing. Sure. That, people don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
They want the instant gratification.
Yep. They want the picture at the end of the race.
And, I love instant gratification.
Sure.
I'm like super impulsive. I love easy shit.
Sure.
It's great. It's easy. But I don't feel that reward unless I have to put in the work.
Absolutely.
And that's you enjoy the struggle. You enjoy the getting on the boat in the rain with Heidi, training yourself, going door to door, grinding and bugs. You'd rather be in a damn submersible underwater where most people, I would lose my mind.
Yeah.
than being a cubicle.
Yeah.
You love the struggle, and I feel like it's because of the reward that lies on the other side of it.
Yes, absolutely. And the feeling that, again, that I get on how my time like on the planet is being spent in feeling again like I'm part in like this small way of like moving the ball. And again, like when we got into this whole like, ranching and cattle company,
which we hadn't even touched on yet.
Yeah. And so, when I wanted, so I was working at a job that was more like an office-based thing, and it was fine. It was great. It was a good job, and it turned out to be like a great experience right after I got out of the Navy. And it just wasn't like the perfect fit for me, but I used to go and like kind of help and volunteer to help. I can't say I was much help in the beginning at like friends of mine's ranches, because it was like one of these things. It was like a lot of parallels to the military, where like it was like kind of like like-minded people. There was a job to do. You had to be like head on a swivel. Like it was a little bit dangerous, and it was physical, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I watched all these guys who did, and they made it look like super easy. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And maybe from like the hunting thing, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it, when I did it before and had worked on some ranches, like when we first moved out here. And I don't know, I like working with animals. And
you guys have started up. You're starting up a ranch.
We literally started a cattle ranch in 2020. And
middle of COVID.
Yep, middle of COVID. We never ran a cattle ranch before.
I don't know if COVID would even impact that at all.
Well, if you remember, though, COVID had a massive impact on the fact that the food chain and supply was being greatly affected, especially in urban areas where like people couldn't get food.
Right. Yeah.
And people were freaking out. And I remember like buddies of mine, from like the East Coast and stuff would call and be like, man, are you guys nervous about this food thing? And like, fortunately for me, like, we have a giant freezer right below us that is full of elk and deer and beef. And I had buddies who had ranches. So like we had awesome high quality protein like in our freezer. And I started to think like, man, that would be really scary. But like, like COVID was like, if you didn't care how you wiped your butt and like, if you had a full freezer.
Toilet paper, what is that?
Yeah, like it wasn't that scary, right? You'd be like, all right, I can make it at home. Like but if you didn't have toilet paper and like you were really concerned about like how you're going to wipe your butt and you had no food, it was probably pretty scary. And if you
shitty butt and no food.
Yeah. And if you had no access to like high quality food, that's also scary, right? And that's like a way where like people get like manipulated and controlled and like it panics them. And I started looking at like kind of why that was happening and just the like food as a process in America. And I had this, number one, I had this like super interest in ranching and like the people who did it were people I like looked up to, and they were like smart and creative. They reminded me of SEAL team guys, to be honest. And they were like super hard work. And it's dirty, and it's like not for everybody. And what I like about it is it's a task driven thing where like it's not like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, go home. Like there's nights where we've started at 5 a.m. and we didn't get off a horse until 10 o'clock at night because the job dictated that.
Yeah.
And I'm good at those like task-based things. And again, I came into that. I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I want to learn. And I had some awesome people that it started out like me having to like ask to come up and help, to them starting to call me a little more like, hey, we've got this thing going on, to them then calling me and being like, hey, we could really use some extra help. And I started to learn. And through that, I started to like kind of develop a network. And I started looking at what would be considered like short-term cattle on leases, where you don't own the ground. You would own the cattle for a short period of time and run them on somebody else's, ranch. And we had some of those that we tried really hard to make happen that didn't. I had one where a guy like literally like shook my hand and was like, yep, we have a deal. And I worked really hard to like stop that. I called in some favors and like literally the guy stopped calling me back, and I was calling him and texting him and no answer. And finally he calls me back and says, I actually talked to my neighbor and he doesn't want anybody else up here. He's going to take the whole lease. And I thought I had burned some like serious favor networks. And I remember like my current business partner now, who's without him and his family, the Stovall's of Stovall Ranches out of Billings, Montana. Turk said, oh, no big deal. This happens. But it was a lesson I learned, and it was a failure. Like I was so set that we were going to be able to do this thing.
How would you know that?
But I couldn't. And the guy like totally burned me. And it was like but it made me tighten up, right? I can be like, okay, then we got to look at doing this a different way. And it made me better. And it made me learn more. And I looked at more leases, and one of which I really wanted to do. And it wasn't the right fit. And I had to say, no, thank you, this isn't the right fit. But I desperately wanted to do it. And my point is that like, you need to still be calculated in your movements, and you have to do the preparation that it takes to when you make the leap, you've like primed the pump for success. If I had jumped on that lease, I probably would have financially failed on my first true like go around in the cattle industry. And the people that I currently work with now probably wouldn't have the confidence to give me the opportunity that I currently have.
Yeah.
And also timing like worked out. Like I had a great opportunity because of an acquisition of the other business that I was part of. And, you know, that opened up a lot of flexibility, and it opened up flexibility for my main business partner, Tim Sheehy, who I've worked with since the SEAL teams, who's like an incredible entrepreneur and does like amazing. Tim takes like huge dreams and actions them like nobody else I've ever seen. Like the guy like literally built a aerial firefighting company with one plane and nothing, and now it's like one of the biggest. They're out flying forest fires right now.
Like the water scooper?
Yeah, the
plane.
scooper bomber planes. Yeah. Like Tim had a dream to do that, and like got a factory in Canada that wasn't making those planes anymore to like refurbish and remake them. And the dude just like actions things unbelievably. And like, number one is he's like an amazing friend, but he's also like a guy that elevates you. And he started a tech company. Like, and we built this awesome company that like ultimately ended up like getting sold to like a large government defense technologies, company. And that allowed us then to reinvest into this new thing. And
so he has he still has that.
He does. He runs Bridger Aerospace, which is the aero firefighting.
The tech company was separate that you two were on.
Yep, and that got sold, and he's still part of that, and still helps run. I'd say like the big picture stuff on that. And
then you flipped that into Little Belt.
Correct. So we started Little Belt Cattle Company in the fall of 2020, where him and I both sat down. We were on his back porch and we were drinking a couple beers, and we were kind of talking about what was next. And we kind of had this, like great win in kind of both our lives. And Tim also, I have to say, gave me an opportunity when I needed one most. When I got out of the Navy, I knew I wanted to be in Montana, and Tim gave me an opportunity when I really needed one. And part of, that was...
after the Navy, you went into the tech company.
I did, yep.
Okay.
And I was one of the first like handful of guys, and we started this company with like a bunch of like college kids and veterans, and we honestly like didn't know what we were doing, and we figured it out. And we actually developed this drone defense technology. And I say we, I mean, I helped, but these kids, on their first big project, like developed this thing that the Marine Corps started using, and it turned it in, and we learned a ton about business. And so Tim and his brother Matt, who was also involved in that business, we all sat down and kind of like, well, what's next? What are we going to do? And I was at this great opportunity because I actually kind of had the ability to like make a change if I wanted. And so I started saying to those guys, I've really been looking at this ranching thing with COVID and all these things. I think the timing is really good. There was like a gap. And there's this book that I love that like talks about like finding and filling a gap. And like that has to be like, what can I do better than anybody else like in the world right now that nobody else is kind of like doing? Or where is these opportunities? And I personally see a lot of opportunity in, everybody wants to go into like tech and these different things where they're sitting in their computers, but nobody wants to be like a tradesman anymore. Nobody wants to be an electrician and a plumber and a welder or a rancher. Mm-hmm. And like the kids of people who grew up doing that now have like gone to college, and they don't maybe like see wanting to go back to that. But I think there's a huge gap for people who didn't come from that, who have a ton of energy to do those things. Like I know guys who like grew up ranching that never want to pound another fence post in their life. And rightfully so, because their dad made them do it from the time they were like, whatever, they could walk, to like the time they went to college and did something different. And I'm like, every post I get to pound, I see it as like an opportunity and something like I wanted to be doing and didn't have a chance until I made my own chance. And Tim and I sat down and he's like, I'm super interested in this space. And we started like looking at areas and we found a couple places and we ultimately found like 3 properties that were for sale next to each other. Again, good timing. We were able to work a deal out with them. And
so you acquired 3 properties.
We did.
What are the chances of 3 properties?
Small.
Yeah.
And this is like before like that market kind of like went crazy with COVID. We were like, our timing was very good. We got very fortunate in like the places that we found. One of them wasn't even really like on the market. And to make that deal close though was also very challenging because like we had to get the middle one to fall first before the other 2, because if we didn't get the middle one, they wouldn't be together and then it would fall apart. So I like, as I developed that like real estate deal, like we intentionally developed it so that like we closed on the most critical one and then the other ones. And I'd say like one thing that's helped us be successful like in the business space is looking at it more from like a military operational mindset. And it's maybe not always going to be perfect, but like you find like the right thing. And sometimes like 80% is good enough for a go, right? And we found these 3 properties. They worked really well for what I considered to be, true agricultural space. And if you look at America right now, like production agriculture space is going away because it's being bought as like recreational property or a number of other things. But that critical land for food production is diminishing. And I see a huge amount of value in the future, in that space. And I think transitioning, veterans or guys with special operations or any military background suit that really well because you get really good at like not worrying about the environment that you're operating in. You have to get the job done. You're good at coming in with, I'll call like a new guy. When you join the SEAL teams in the beginning, you're referred to affectionately as an FNG or a fucking new guy, which means like you're going to mess things up. You're learning, right? Like you're the least trained Navy SEAL on the planet Earth when you walk into the space for the first time. And I take that mentality into
every FNG rancher.
Yep. And I go every ranch that I go that will let me come and help sometimes and be in the way at others. I ask a ton of questions and I say, I've never done this before. I've only done this twice. Hey, that was really cool what you just did. How did you do that? And what we've been able to do in like a very traditional business that doesn't like do a lot of changes, we've kind of been able to pick what we've liked from all these operations that I've kind of like gone to. And, and taking all the things that I think like certain operations do really well and then like smushing them into what we're doing at Little Bell Cattle Company, which is trying to use like regenerative ranching practices that are like positive for the environment. We get to do like a whole podcast on this, so I'm not going to get like super nerdy on it. But there's agriculture ranching practices that can do a lot for the environment and climate and the environments that you're like actually like running cattle on while producing super high quality protein, for the country. And what we're trying to do is like put those 2 circles together and kind of fill this gap in the middle of high quality, super high quality genetics that make like super high quality, healthy beef, but also doing it in a way that gets away from kind of like what I'll call like the industrial agriculture. We're still very much in production agriculture, but we're trying to do it in these ways that if more and more people did it, could have like a huge positive environment effect and could have climate change reversal and can also do it while feeding the country, which is also like a huge service in my opinion. So like my life also goes back a little bit to like, I like the feeling, I guess, of like serving others. And even when I was like teaching people how to fly fish, I felt a lot of benefit because there was times where maybe like a guy who had cancer or whose kid died or something bad happened was like, man, that was like the first day I didn't think about that because you're focused on this little bug and fish eating it. And when you like to think about something else, like that's when it happens. And that's when like Guide Greg yells at you and you're like, oh, I missed it, And then I loved like working with and like ultimately like I felt like I was at like service to my buddies in the Navy to try to be like a great teammate to them and try to be there to make like watch your back and you watched mine and never like I had a commitment from and to them to do that. And I really like this new thing because it's really hard and I'm learning. And every day I wake up, I'm in the struggle, and I'm in the struggle with like what I would consider to be like pretty
beyond the gray. You jump beyond the gray, you're in that discomfort.
I intentionally, when I decided that like this is the direction I was going to go, my wife again was like, oh great, here we go. And we've had a lot of conversations and hard conversations about how challenging it is to be married to somebody like me. And if she walked up here right now, like she would have some very funny.
So after this next podcast will be with Heidi Putnam.
Yeah, she can tell you all about the joys of being married to somebody who like has no problem making these like massive 180-degree turns in these different directions. And it is hard on not just the person in the struggle, but the unit,
the family unit.
Yep.
I sent, God help us if Heidi and Jenny ever get together.
Yeah.
I sent Jenny a text yesterday, 2 days ago, a house in Ireland that's for sale. I'm like, hey, look, perfect time to sell a home.
Yeah.
Ireland, we can move. It's not Guatemala. It's not like
think of the experience.
But like, we could go over there. And she said, why would you buy it? Why don't you just rent? I'm like, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Why would you buy in Ireland? You could just rent there.
But it's like a start. But
I don't really think about Ireland. I never actually been to Ireland.
Yeah. And for some reason you're like, oh, Ireland, and I get like, I'm the first one to admit like that can be like a very annoying person to like
totally get it.
To be around, right? Because like in those, and again, back to like the balance and the commitment to success of like what you're driving towards. Like I'm somebody though that can like see the big picture, I guess. And sometimes I'm not good at communicating what I see the big picture as. So number one, like not only do I feel like we're like playing this very small part of like feeding the planet, which I think is like hugely beneficial, to America. Not so much the planet. I care more about feeding America.
Yeah.
But I also see this amazing opportunity of like, as my kids get older, what I'm going to be able to give them is the lesson of like hard work.
Imagine what they're going to look at. Like when you're on your deathbed and when you die, they're not going to remember somebody who just casually walked through life. They're going to see the grind, the work, the dedication, the commitment, what it means to achieve your goal.
And what it means to change the course for yourself that maybe you weren't like set up for.
To make those shifts. To make those jumps.
Exactly. And I want my kids to like have the opportunity that like where they're going to learn hard work through like, and they're learning like valuable life lessons. And they don't, they can do as much as they can right now, but I see it when they're 20 and they're coming back. And I hope that we're still running Little Bell Cattle Company. And I hope we've like grown, and I hope we're running like more cattle and bigger business. And I hope we're doing it on a scale that's having these like massive impacts that I think are so valuable. But I hope my kids can come back and be like, I want to come back to this, and if I want to, but they're going to learn things that will carry over. And again, I don't care how untalented you are. If you know how to work hard and you know how to prepare yourself for success and you're dedicated to the reps, you can get there. Yeah. And I don't care what it is. If your little voice is like, I want to be doing this, you can get there. You're going to lose some stuff along the way. People aren't going to like you for it. You're probably going to lose relationships. You're going to have times where people find you to be extremely challenging to be around. And these are people you love dearly and like don't want to hurt. And you're going to have to make the sacrifices necessary, but you have to keep the big picture in mind of why you're doing it. And it can't be because I want to, ride a horse around during the day or something, or like I want to go to the bar and tell. You'll never make it through Buzz if you want to go tell girls at the bar that you're a Navy SEAL and that's your intent. If you desperately want to be a special operations soldier and do that job overseas, you'll make it through Buzz all day. And it's 50-50. It's on you. And like people can tell you all day long, like you can make it or you can't, but it is on you to decide, and nobody can determine that except for you. And just like you running that marathon, you could have laid down in mile 8 and quit.
Well, I guess, back to I mentioned real quick the people who are complaining in their cubicles and they come home and they complain. I don't care that people work in a cubicle. Like,
Yeah.
that's a great job. They're great. But if you don't like working in that cubicle, don't complain.
Change it.
Change it.
Yep. And you need to be like
Change it.
relentlessly and unapologetically committed to what that goal is. And if that goal has large scale benefit to other people, then maybe they don't see it right at that time, but you see it and you're working towards it. You know, that value will keep you driving. And I remember, like, kind of back to what I was saying, where I value my time greatly for the reasons that we talked about. The other thing that I've felt in my life is, like, if I was to say all the things that we're talking about right now to other people, to my kids, but I wasn't doing that, then, like, the action is what matters. So I can't say to my kids, if you try and you prepare and you train and you're dedicated to this goal, like, you're going to get closer to it than if you did nothing, if I wasn't doing that too. And I'm a huge believer in, like, you need to be setting the example of what you're, like, practicing, kind of what you preach, I guess, for a better, like, term. And that is something for me, again, like, I want my kids to look at me, and I don't care if this thing fails. It's the attempt at doing something of high value and giving it, like, but again, preparing the tracks for success before you got to know how to swim before you dive in the deep end. And that might mean you got to put the swimmies on and go to the little kids class and swim around in the deep end and blow bubbles first. But you got to put yourself at that level. And you have to be okay with knowing in the beginning, you probably are going to suck. You know who else sucked? Everybody else who started. And I don't care if you're 40, 10, 50, if you're making a change or you want to get better, a new guy mindset that, like, if you go in though and pretend like you know how to swim, you're probably not going to do very well. If you go in and be like, hey, I've never swam before, I want to learn, and then you're like, hey, I'm ready to get in the deep end, you're probably going to do a lot better. And that's what I've done. And again, I've had people that have helped me along the way that I could say to, hey, like, I've done the reps. Now I'm ready to get in the game. And I might not, I might strike out the first time, but I learned something at that. And when I went back to the bench, they said, hey, next time try this.
Yeah, man, it makes me sad when I hear, like, people, or I know of people who can achieve great things and they don't take that step just because they're afraid of failure, or afraid of, even worse, somebody else seeing them fail or perceiving them fail. Like,
but that holds more people back, like, right? Like, it's like, again, like, it's better than to have, like, tried and failed. You can look up, like, the great Teddy Roosevelt quote, right?
Yeah.
But it's great to, like, do that. At least you're not, like, this sideline person kind of, like, trolling other people's success, and again, some people get so scared of, like, well, what if I fail? And I guess that's one thing for me, like, I don't give a shit. And it's probably because I started out, like, not being overly successful in school and things, where, like, I knew I was going to find success in the areas that I pursued greatly. And I really didn't give a shit about the rest of it, but other people did. And they kind of looked at me, and I had people say to me, like teachers, like, oh, you're never going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
And again, like, when you say that to a kid, like, what are you doing though that's so great to, like, set this example?
That's a piece of shit.
It's a total piece of shit.
That's a piece of shit.
And if you're
100% a child,
yeah,
or, like, so even an adult. So all adults don't have. I don't believe in this whole we're all created equal stuff. I don't believe in it. Like, I have a better talent than you do at something, and you have a better talent than I do at something. I'm 6'6", you're 5'8".
7. Yeah.
It's just, we're all different.
Totally.
And even through our upbringings are all different. Even some adults need motivation. They need somebody to grab their hand and say, let's go.
Absolutely.
And then there's nothing worse than a complete piece of shit who is so insecure, is so weak, is such a coward, that they have to feel better by hurting somebody else.
Exactly. And they're doing that because they're never going to do great things, and they know that.
They know it.
In the back of their head, they're like, this is it, and I'm going to discourage somebody, instead of being like, hey, and again, I have kids call me on a regular basis. They want to be SEALs. And I'm like, I will never be the person because I don't know. And that's something you learn right away. You could look at this like short little fat kid from Nebraska and you're like, versus some jacked 6'4" guy, did this and that. And that little fat kid is like the hardest. I mean, you can't get rid of it.
Inside his head's different.
But if you looked at him, but like I will never discourage somebody from like, there's people I've said to, hey, if you're going to do this, you have a number of things you need to like overcome, I think. And is this really what you want? But I'm never going to be the one that says like, no, you shouldn't do this. Like I will encourage you and tell you like, if you want it bad enough, you can do it. And I'm kind of like to all those people out there that have like either do that or have let somebody like that like negatively affect you. It's like, you got to get over that. And if your fear is that they're going to be right because like you tried and failed, I promise you will learn more from that failure that will get you closer to the center of like whatever your target of success looks like than if you hadn't tried. And it's another one of those things is the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And my wife and I have talked a lot about that. Like I will make those hard shifts because I've done them.
Yeah.
So they're not they're still scary. And I'm somebody too, like, yeah, I don't want to fail. Like I don't want all the people who like told me like I couldn't do it to be right. And they probably will be right to a certain extent, but I don't care because I'll keep going and I'll keep trying and I'll finally get there. And like, and it's not the only reason, like I'm not out only to like prove those people wrong. I'm also out to prove myself right. And I'm out to like prove other people that are cheering for me that, I'm a worthy cause.
You're worth it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally like, to going back to that, the range of our choices and our comfort zones, we'll say the gray areas in the middle, wherever it is. And if for some people it's here, some people it's over here. And the more uncomfortable choices that we make, the more we get beyond that gray area, the greater our comfort becomes. We're people, and not me, but like people will start make choices that seem like others that are just like so far out there.
Yep.
Super risky, and to them it's completely comfortable. It's like, it's like where you're at this point, people would think, some people would say like, oh gosh, starting a ranch, like you're not, how do you, like that is not, for some they couldn't,
like where do you even start, right? And like I'll go back to the other thing where it's like, how do you eat an elephant?
Right, yeah.
One bite at a time, right? So like if you can start with the big picture, the end result of what you visualize like yourself doing and what success looks like to you, and then you basically like backtrack from there, like it'll tell you everything you need to do. Like if you suck at running marathons, you know what you got to do? You got to go out and run, and you got to build a running plan. And if your success is like, hey, that first one was tough, I want to do better on the next one, like you saw the other people run across the line.
Man, in my office I had the lineup card for my last game I ever pitched.
Yeah.
It was Big East Championship against Notre Dame. I got hurt year before, didn't didn't play for like a month and a half for, and just became a turd. Became like pathetic in my own head.
Sure.
And, like I should be playing.
Yeah.
The typical shit you tell yourself.
Sure.
I should be playing, and then I get the knock on the door the day before a championship game. He's like, hey, coach is like, hey, you want to start tomorrow? Hell yeah. Get out there. Took that time off. I lost the game for the team. That lineup card's in my office.
Yeah.
Like I want that shit to be in my head.
Yeah, and it should, right? Like anybody, in my opinion, that is like striving for these things, the wins are easy. The wins, you're like, that's what should have happened, right? Like I did the prep. I didn't take the time off. I went out there and crushed it. Like, yeah, that's what I was supposed to do. The failures are what sting and stick with you, and not in like a dwelling way or like a regret way. Like I don't regret any of the mistakes that I've made in my life. Like they've gotten me here as long as I've like learned from those. And I would say the same thing like about those failures. Like there's times where you felt like you did all the prep and you came up short.
Yeah.
But that teaches you next time is like, maybe you thought you did enough, but you didn't. And like, again, like that is on you, and like nobody's going to do it for you. And again, it comes down to doing like the right thing for like you and your family or whatever you're like, you have going on. And it starts small. And sometimes it starts with knocking on the door and saying, I'll work for you for free. Hey, I will volunteer and give you help you got to answer all my questions at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I will ask a lot of questions. And I mean, I was meeting with Turk Stovall this morning, and like what should have been like a 10-minute conversation was probably like a 10-hour and 10-minute conversation. Because like, as we talk about things, it's just like boom, boom, boom. And again, like there is a guy that is committed to my success and as like a good partner and business partner. Like we complement each other. We come from different backgrounds. There's things I give him advice on that are in like completely different realm, and there's things he gives me advice on, and like we're trying to like mutually support each other in like our business and in our goals, also in our lives, though, right? And you got to have like those people, and you got to have those people like cheering for you, but you also have to be able to step away from those people that are convincing you.
Got to cut them out.
Yep.
Let's put in the scale the size of the ranch.
Yep.
Acreage, cattle-wise.
Sure. So we at one place, we run about 10,000 acres between our owned and leased acreage at Little Belt Ranch, which is in central Montana. At that ranch, we run kind of a traditional like cow-calf operation. And we have approximately 350 cows up there that all have calves every spring. So like currently as we stand today, we have about 700 animals that we care for at that property. And
10,000 acres, 700 animals.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And we, so it'd be one mom, one baby. And it's been a challenging summer because it's been like a lot of drought and super dry. So like we're kind of coming in again, into like more struggle. So a lot of people are like, man, if you guys are doing all right now, like but a lot of that comes down because I am so afraid of it like failing that I like wake up in the middle of the night and think about like the planning and the contingencies and what if this. I'm obsessive about it, and I don't. It can be hard because it does like it literally. I care that much though, but that has been a reason I think that we've like it's going well for us. You know,
yeah, I'm sure. Well, I mean, so these calves are what will become the beef.
Correct. Yep.
So that'll happen.
That goes. So basically, we'll raise these
year?
calves up. Yep. It'll be like next year, and then they'll go through. And we're basically trying to keep like ownership of those, and eventually get to more of what I'll call like the direct to consumer model, where we'll be selling. Like you could go online and order, but it takes for like if you're starting a ranch, it takes close to 2 years before you have product.
Yeah. So these calves will go to like your market store. Your market.
And then they'll basically go. They'll can continue through that like that ranch like life cycle to the point where they're like processed, and those will go into the beef system.
I would imagine like a higher end.
Yeah, absolutely. So we
markets.
sell into kind of our two biggest markets are certified Angus beef, and then we do this Wagyu line as well. And we sell that into what's called Mishima Reserve, which is a marketed program out of Seattle, which I'm wearing the hat right now. And so we're like, one of the things we want to do is as people care more about like who and where their food comes from, is we want to be like a proud kind of production partner where these marketed programs can go in, or people can go and look at our Instagram or our website and see kind of like who we are and what we do and why we do it. And we're trying to get away from, and I think in the future, you're going to see, if you go to like a Whole Foods market, like there's probably going to be a barcode at some point where you like scan it with your phone in the ranch that meat came from. And what I
suck at hunting.
Sure.
But I love hunting.
Sure.
But I love to know like when like you're cooking so we have a garden, we've got chickens. Like I know my chicken, where it's coming from, I know where my eggs are coming from.
There's a weird pride in knowing the story behind it.
Just to go to a store and buy random, first of all, to buy like things that have just been shipped around the world to us in itself is like, how the hell is that food getting here? And then to just randomly buy meats and perishables that you aren't actually sure where they came from.
Or what's going into those. We go into a whole thing about like, and again, like I'm a huge, fortunately for me, like a little bit later, like you kind of got your like high level, what I'll call just like human performance at a young age, like in college, which probably like in getting to college and playing baseball, like at that level, like set the foundation for you. Like, you know what it takes to perform at a high level, and that carries over into business and things. I learned that in the Navy, and a big part of that was like also, and you're probably fully aware with this, with like your CrossFit stuff and then your marathons and baseball, and what you eat plays a huge role in like how you feel.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And like, I want my kids eating, and that's why I hunt, and I know where my food comes from. And I want people who, like, if you're like, I jokingly like tell this good buddy of mine, who like runs all the big game stuff at Sitka Gear. Like, we're a cattle company for people who can't fill their tank. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we want to be like, where you're like, yeah, maybe like the story's not the same, but I want you to feel like the quality. And when you look at our stuff, I want you to feel involved in the process of like what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we try to be like very transparent on like, we don't have all the answers, but we're trying to get them. We try really hard, and it's a weird thing, just like hunting, where at the end of the day, you're harvesting this animal that you care far more about than like some anti-hunter, to get yourself into the positions where like a large bull elk is, or a large whitetail, to know that much about the animal, to even get yourself into a position to like make a clean shot. The number of arrows that you shoot in practice to make like a perfect shot is all out of like respect for where your food comes from.
Insane.
And it's very sad. Like it's a very like there's this like dichotomy. You're so happy that like all that practice paid off. And my wife said to me, like, really, another day elk hunting? Like, and so you're like, your time and effort you're putting in to get there. But the reward is also like something that like, you just have to kill something to get it, you know, but it's sustaining your life and your kid's life. And we want to be in the same thing, like the amount of care that we put into our like cattle and our calves, and like we will stay up, you know, all night to get a calf warm, or like we will bottle feed something that ultimately is going to go, we know where it's going, but we care that much to the same level that we care about like animals that we hunt, of doing all the things right, so that you're showing like a high level of respect to those animals. And at the end of the day, you're producing something that like is necessary for healthy living, and like the healthy living of like my friends, their families, and my community. And I want to be like involved in a part of that, instead of being the person who just like stands back and goes like, well, I hope they didn't pump this thing full of hormones before I give it to my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, and I want our customers to know where like our meat comes from and like how we do business. And we're very proud of that. And we like spend a lot of time and effort.
But you're telling the story along the way. And that's not the meat, your beef, once it's in stores.
Yep.
People can go online right now and see the story.
Yes.
Like they can jump on Instagram and see the pictures.
And they can determine if they like the way, you know, that we do.
The story is out there.
Yes. We're being extremely transparent. And like, to be perfectly honest, like a funny thing, like in ranching and like long traditional ranches, like I've been yelled at for asking like a rancher or like a rancher's wife, like, hey, how many cows do you have? How many acres do you have? I didn't know that was like, and like, I've been scolded like,
how?
No, you were told, because we don't have a line is my point. It's like, as a new place, we're like, hey, this is what we're running on. This is why. But to some people that would be like, look at us like, well, how much money do you make? Because you could almost like do the math. And what we want to be, I know, because you don't come from that background, right?
Yeah.
But I would never be offended and be like, Don, how dare you? I'm like, hey, this is how many we have. This is why. And I could go into like, I could give you like a really nerdy explanation of like why those numbers make sense for where we're at and how we do business.
I wouldn't even know like the ratio.
Completely.
You could be,
but you can
somebody
gauge.
May have been like, oh, well.
But it's not a big deal in my opinion. And my point is that if people have questions, we want to like engage them, and we try our best. Like if somebody asks us a question on Instagram, we try our best to like answer those questions of like how we got started, why we got started, like why we're doing certain things that we're doing. We're trying to get more veterans involved in ranching. We're trying to do, you know, these things to not encourage people just to go into like, obviously like ranching, but like anything that they find like passion in and that like has like a bigger thing. But yeah, we want to be transparent about what we do and how we do it and why we do it and when we do it. And again, we want to be like, for the two groups that we provide most of our beef into as we get into this like direct to consumer model, which takes time to grow. We want them to come to us and say, hey, like, we want to bring people out to the ranch and show them. We're not scared to show anybody what we're doing. We're actually very proud of it because we feel like we're trying to do things really well. And I think anybody that doesn't have that level of transparency is probably like hiding something, and not always the case. But we really want to be a place in food production where it's not traditional for like large agricultural businesses in processing to like want to show you what it looks like, because it's not, always beautiful. And you're raising things to go into a food system that ultimately, in my opinion, sustains like healthy humans and families. And we all got to eat, and it all comes from somewhere. And if we can do that in a way that has positive environmental impact as well as positive health impact, then like it's a win-win. But there's got to be changes in that industry. And we literally, like I said, we're trying to cherry pick all the good things. And our hope is that we're like a smaller operation to mid-size, is that larger operations who maybe can't afford because they're already like in that business cycle.
They've already got a model or something.
Yeah, and but they also, ranching is a game of pennies, and long multi-generational traditional ranches, like the margins for the work are so slim, and the work that those people do every day to like put food on our tables is really impressive. And like everybody should be like grateful for the fact that like those people are still there doing that.
Yeah.
I know I am, and I look up to those people like greatly. So they can't afford in their business model to make a change that they know isn't going to work. So we're hoping that we can like maybe like make some changes like on their accord on a smaller scale. And if they do work, maybe they do start.
Show a new best practice.
Exactly.
Right.
Or show like a better practice of like, hey, if you graze your animals like this, you actually get more for it. Or like if you go with like this type of like program, like there is more margin. And
if you tell the story,
yep,
people love your brand.
Yep.
And let's be honest, what is it? Little Bell Cattle Co.
Little Bell Cattle Company. We do
on
Little Bell
Instagram.
Cattle Co. Yep.
Is that Little Bell Cattle Co?
Yep.
Oh, your beautiful Navy SEAL hair with the cowboy hat.
It's just
flowing.
Those coat hair that just went way wild. It needs to be taken care of at some point. But yes, you will see that there.
The cowboy hat with a Navy SEAL hair
flow. That's right. That's right.
So, what the hell was I going to ask you? No, I wasn't going to ask. The fact that you're so transparent in the startup of this process, I think, is even more telling to how successful you're going to be. I mean, like, to start up this big of a project like this and to be so out there with it, I mean.
And again, I don't care if people I don't care what anybody like thinks about me, or like if we fail and you and I are sitting here in like 2 years and everyone's like, ooh, that was a bad one. I still would have this conversation and I would still talk about it and I would still put it out there, because again, I don't care what anybody thinks ultimately about like my like overall success or failures. I do care that I'm setting an example for the people that like, think that it's a positive example. And I would rather try to do this and show my kids that like, this is something I always was interested in. I'm fostering that. I did do a program though through Texas A&M. Again, prepped. I worked for places for free, prepped. I did that on the weekends when I could have been home.
And you didn't read Ranching 101 for Dummies.
But I would.
You've done the work.
Yeah, I would do anything that I felt like got me started, right? And I did the same thing with all the things I've kind of done. But I would not be afraid to put myself out there to tell people what I'm doing anymore, for the sake, because the more people I tell, the more of a reality it becomes and the more I have to do it. And I would almost get in the habit of start telling people. And I did that to a certain extent, limited more. But I've had some success now, so I'm not as like afraid. But I'll tell people now, this is what I'm going to do. And like it or not, the more I say it, the more I'm kind of forced to do it, because if nobody knows and I fail, like
easy to back.
I sweep it under the rug.
That never happened.
But if I'm out here like doing podcasts and on Instagram and we're talking about it and we're doing things and this is like an epic failure, then I'm responsible for that. But I'm not afraid to say we're trying.
Yeah.
And we're trying our darndest. And we are going to give it one hell of a go. And at the end of the day, we're going to learn a ton. And that might go someplace else. I don't know where. And one of the best pieces of advice that I guess I got was, don't worry about what happened in the past. Don't worry about what's coming up. Be focused on what you're doing right now and focus on doing that to like the best of your ability with what you have. And the other things will kind of work out.
Yeah.
And that mentality, sometimes you can focus a year ahead. Sometimes you're like, oh, man, I just got to get out of the cubicle at the end of the day. And when I get home, I'm going to write that business plan or whatever the case may be. I'm going to go work out. And
5 to 9, right?
Yeah. And you're doing those things, right? And the more you say it, the more the reality. And again, I don't care if you want to call it like fake it till you make it or whatever the case. I don't care if you're lying to yourself and you're saying every day, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do this thing. The more you say it and the more people you say it to, the more of a reality it becomes. And the more you're almost like forcing yourself to do it. And I would encourage you to do that because it is uncomfortable to say, especially the first time, I really want to do this, especially when it's something that you really wanted to do that maybe isn't like the perfect next step or something that like you grew up doing or, you know what I mean? But like a lot of people like that started those things, started it with just like one step forward, right? Mm-hmm. And to start the marathon, you got to take the first step.
Yeah. And what's it really matter if somebody sees you fail?
It doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter at all. Unless you allow it to,
unless you allow it to like, I failed in front of like far better people and far worse people. And I've failed miserably in front of people that I hold their opinions at like the highest regard. And you know what, at the end of the day, they still love me.
Yeah.
They still like me.
And if they don't, it's easy. It's easy.
You see their true colors.
It makes it. I love when people don't support me.
Yeah.
Thank you. You just made it so easy.
But then you realize that within those setbacks, your true friends are still there. The people who really care about you are still there.
And they will be.
And they will be.
Yeah.
And then you become a frightening person because you will start to try to get better and bigger and do bigger things and more impactful. And you will not let these little things, you learn a valuable lesson that like these failures are just small setbacks unless you let them be something more. And don't let that one thing overwhelm you. Stay in the moment, stay on task, fix it, realize you're probably the cause of that thing not working. And you're an active participant in like the success and failures of all the things that you do. And you have to be the one though that like recognizes why it didn't work. Be like your own toughest like critic, but not in a negative way where you sit there and think like, oh, what a loser. You just think like, oh, hey, like these things didn't work and here's why probably. Mm-hmm. I'm going to work harder in those areas so that next time when I direct that at something else, I know where those pitfalls are and I'm going to avoid those and I'll be ready for like the next set of them. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I'm like better and better.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how you can like grow so much, learn so much through your failures?
That's where everybody, like, that's the stuff that sticks with you, right? Like that baseball, that is such a great, and some people might be like, oh, that's like real negative. It's not negative. It's a reminder of a place that you let yourself go, that you could have been a more active participant in the end result.
Yeah. And like things happen, like the marathon happened. I did a CrossFit competition recently. I haven't done CrossFit in like what I would consider consistent CrossFit in like 2 years.
Yeah.
But I decided to do a CrossFit competition. What the hell was I thinking?
Sure.
Stupid.
Yeah.
I failed. I did horrible. Like, you know what? I didn't train. Like, it wasn't,
Yeah.
Life and like life choices, that's not going to happen.
Yes.
I will never, in my office and I'm making, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. And it's okay to like test those waters a little bit to kind of remind yourself of why the preparation pays off. Right. And so, you don't go to Bud's without ever, jumping in the pool and learning, or you shouldn't. Maybe there's some freaks out there who can. You don't, start a business in a space that you literally have no inkling about, right? Like you start learning, you gauge your interest, you make sure this is the direction, you listen to the little voice, you foster it. And, and along the way, I think you foster other people and you get that back in people and find those people who foster you and find those people who like encourage you and like rely on them and tell them like, this is what I'm going to do. And like, make them hold you accountable too. You know what I mean? Like,
a friend, like, I don't want a friend who's going to be like, good
job at everything.
Or like, just stop.
Yeah. No, I want a friend who's
like, no, it's getting tough now.
It's okay. Take a little break.
Back it down.
Everybody loves those people, right? And they're the same negative people that say, you know what, Don?
It's all right.
You're 277 pounds. You're 6'6". You don't need to be running this marathon. Look at that little voice in your head of those people that say, it's okay. Take a little break.
At the top of Kilimanjaro, we were climbing, my wife and I summited Kilimanjaro. She's allergic to the anti-elevation medicine that you take.
Yep.
So I'm like, well, I'm not taking it either because I want to know what you're going through in case things get weird.
Sure.
So I can process the best I can. Well, there is no decision-making process at that point. Like my blood oxygen level it plummeted.
Yep.
It was gone. I should have been evacuated. But my buddy was with us, and we were so close.
Yep.
And a couple people on the team with us said, it's fine. I'm like, we have to go. Like, I know what's happening right now, and we have to go.
Yep.
Like, we're not going down. We have to continue going because we have to get there so that I can go back down. Like, going back down requires me to go that way first.
Yep.
And then back down.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. We're going to do quick questions. And one of these, I don't want to load your answer. But one of the things that scares the shit out of me is knowing that I can't do it. Like, if I was that close to the summit and I just turned around.
Yep.
That was a smart thing to do. Turning around would have been the smart thing to do. Stopping at mile 8 would have been the smart thing to do. But man, to know that I can crack like that scares the shit out of me.
But that's the mental part, right? Because that is the moment where like, that's where the guy rings the bell, right? That's where the guy says, you know what? Yeah. I've tried up until this point on this business and I had another setback. I'm done. And instead of saying, and again, there's times, right, in all our lives, like whether it's mountaineering or whatever, like you got to know the time where you're like, okay, I've pushed as far as I can physically push at this moment. And I started looking at these life changes. And I don't want to be seen as a person that just like bounces from one thing to another because I'm not. Like I do these things in
very strategic
duration. Yeah. And when I make these shifts, like I've thought through them a lot. Like I'm not a on the whim guy. I'm not, I'm going to go join the Navy. Like I started that process as a teenager and didn't complete it successfully till a mid-20s guy. Like
that was almost an 8-year prep.
Yeah. I mean, it was literally 8 years of like preparation in certain ways and life experience that like got me there, right? So I'm not like a guy who makes like quick shifts, but I make big shifts when the time is right. And I feel like I've prepared myself. But there's times where I'm like, and again, like, like your level of fitness at that point, what you've been through before, but it's that mental moment in those people around you that say, you know what, Don, it's okay. Take a little break, go to the bottom. You'll get them next time. And those aren't the people I want around me.
Yeah,
everybody loves that. You know why? Those are the comfort people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, Don, kick your shoes off, take a little break, big deal.
They'll wade into the gray. They will wade into the gray, but they won't get beyond.
And they're the same people that will discourage, and they're the same people that say, you know what? And we need those friends that say, keep going. Push a little harder.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. Mm-hmm. You're so close. Mm-hmm. What did you learn? Just, keep it up. And those are the people you like want around you. And you want people that are like passionate and like energetic. And if you don't have that, like they exist. You just got to put yourself in the right like circumstances and groups. And like we talked about in the beginning, like, we've all like either had those, you know what that feels like. And if you don't have it, it's because like you're not surrounding yourself with the right people. And you got to be around people that are elevating you and are encouraging you. Even if that encouragement is to do like, some wild shit that like some people aren't comfortable with.
Look, I mean, like the most uncomfortable thing that you could probably some people need to do is super simple. It's probably just moving.
Yeah.
Changing your environment. It is so hard it can be so hard to remove family, to remove best friends. But, so many times they're the ones that hold you back.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, again, like, it's that the level of commitment, if you want it bad enough, it's literally like, like a samurai level of commitment to the task. No more safety nets. You burn the ships when you get to the shore, and you don't give yourself the outs, and you make it uncomfortable on yourself. And again, like one of the things that like I've learned is like, if you can be, comfortable with being uncomfortable, and kind of accept how you're going to like make that situation like doable, like you can do it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And look at people like, think like astronauts and these like doctors and like all these like super high performing people. Like you think their life is built around like comfort, and like you think that they're like sitting there like, man, this is pretty comfortable. Like, no, it's based on the fact that they've learned to manage themselves like well in a high stress, uncomfortable situation. And all those people that like tell you, discourage you or tell you like, it's okay, like you don't have to go to the gym today, like take a little break, you earned it. Those are the people that are luring you into the comfort zone that will never
pull you right back.
Yeah, like a hunting thing. It's like you can't kill them from the couch. Well, you can't kill anything from the couch, right? And the people that say, Dan, sit down. Let's watch a movie.
Take a break.
Take a little break. You earned it.
You're sweating.
Yeah. They should. You need the buddies that are like, you should be sweating.
What are you doing?
Yeah. You should go out and sweat a little more.
That couch looks uncomfortable.
Yeah. And that's where I think you get to that point, but it is uncomfortable making those changes because it is. It's hard to do. But if you've done the preparation, when you take the leap, you're going to feel like you've got the parachute in the bag. You packed it. It's coming out. How you put it in there. You did all your emergency procedures. And when you take the jump, you're like, I'm ready for this. And it might scare you, but you're prepared for like how to mitigate those fears because the preparation you put in. And when the time's right and the door's open and that gap like shows itself, you better fill it. Because if you don't, somebody else will. And you'll be sitting there going like, I once knew this guy and like I could have started this thing with him and I didn't. And again, if you're calculated in the way that you're moving forward, then you'll be just fine. But I encourage anybody that has interest in doing more with themselves to give it a try and make that commitment to yourself that you're going to do it, whatever that is for you. And if you do it once, you're going to be like, oh, if I did that, I did a marathon.
It becomes a drug.
Now what can I do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the struggle of just like, what's the next test, right? And now you're not just like this human that's just like here taking up space. You're like an evolving human being who's like learning and doing stuff. And like you're setting an example instead of like looking for an example. And, you're
leading.
You are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like, we all need those people and we all have to be followers at times. We all have to be leaders at times. And however you get there is cool. And I would just encourage you at some point, it will be too late. And that could be like the day you're on your deathbed or just like an age thing or like a time where you have the financial stability to try something different or you don't. And you're in a corner. You're like, man, I always wanted to do this. I'm going to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself the opportunity to go for it because you'll learn something of value that will carry on and you'll get closer to whatever that like center target looks like. And maybe that changes. but you'll get there far quicker than if you never do anything.
Yeah. Quick questions. All right, ready?
Yep. I'm good.
What are you scared of?
Oh man, that's a good one. I'm scared of wasting time on this planet to where like I don't feel like I've gotten everything out of it, and I'm terrified of being the guy at the end who is crying because they didn't do all the stuff. They wanted more time, and we all get like a finite time here, and I am terrified of not using that to like the best of my ability, and I felt like I've wasted time at points, and I feel like I have like squeezed every drop, and I know how good it feels to do that, and I want to come in at the end and be like, I took chances, I set an example, I took risks, and I did it in areas that like mattered to me and mattered to like something bigger than me, and I'm scared of not leaving like things better than I found them.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be part of like these solutions instead of like somebody that's like part of a problem. And I want to do, I'm afraid of not doing like the shit that I'm personally like proud of, in a way that, it has lasting like positive impact on other people.
Mm-hmm. What do you love?
Oh man, that's another good one. I love, obviously, I love my family.
Yeah.
I'd say all the things that I ultimately do come down to the fact that I'm always trying to like put them in like a better position and put them in a position where they can pursue all the things that like give them passion and like fire. And, so I obviously that's like a pretty easy answer. I mean, I also love, I love a good challenge, and I love feeling like I'm doing something that I personally like am proud of and am proud to tell people. And yeah, I think those are I love Western United States. I love America. I love all like my family and friends. Like all the people that have helped me along the way, all my buddies that are like still in the Navy. I've had a lot of great people, and I'm grateful for them. And I do have like a lot of love and appreciation for those people.
That's awesome. Who do you want to be like?
That's a good question. I mean, it changes, I think. Like there's times where I see people I can name like 10 mentors and things of people I want to be like.
What does that be a name? You can be like a type.
I want to be like, I want to be like the people, I guess, that I look up to, who are the people that, that take risk, for like self in personal growth. I want to be like the people that challenge themselves. I want to be like the people that do epic shit every day, like whatever that means to them, but have like the courage to get out there. I want to be like the people who like there's no slowing them down. It doesn't matter what their setbacks are. I want to be like the people who just grind and drive and do it for the right reasons, and like they just do it, and they like, those are the people I want to be like.
Who do you not want to be like?
I do not want to be like those people who just let life pass them by and they have no control over their like destiny of where they're going. I do not want to be like those poor souls that sit on the sideline and critique other people. And I do not want to be like, those people who just never go for it. And I would be pretty bummed out of myself if
you are not one of them.
If I fell into that category. But yeah,
you're not in that category. What should everyone do every day?
Well, there's some great answers on this one. I'd say number one, I think if you should break a sweat every day in some capacity, like if that's at work, working out, but like you have this awesome vessel and like it's made to be used, and get out there and like do shit. So break sweat every day, and I'd say do something. You need to do something for yourself every day. Whether that's like maybe that a workout is that thing, or like just something, maybe journal. You got to take a moment to do something that is kind of for you. Because I think a lot of us get in habits in our lives where we're doing like everything for everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's not selfish to take a moment to do something that's like, as long as it's like a healthy thing, like if it's like, I'm going to do heroin for myself today. Like
drink a bottle of liquor.
Yeah, like maybe not do that, but like, if there's something that's like kind of a positive thing that you enjoy, I don't know, like I like to try to shoot my bow every day. It's a moment for me to like take a moment off. I got to focus on something different.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like get to take a personal wrap off, but I try to like make time to do that. And so like whatever that is for you, give yourself that like moment, because other people get value in you being like a good version of yourself.
Working with my chickens is my little thing.
You know what's funny? If you could herd chickens like on foot, like you could probably herd cattle on horse. Like
they're pretty good.
The movement of moving livestock can be like so frustrating, but it's so rewarding because like there's so many like little things, nuances to it. And there's times where you're just like, man, I totally nailed that. And then like the other thing I like about like ranching is like there's times you're like, oh, I'm crushing this. Then there's other days you're like, I'm so bad at this.
A chicken in a yard.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Good luck trying to get them into, and like a cow or in calves could be the same way. Like you're in these massive pastures and you need to get them someplace else. Like they will humble you. And just like the military, like your best laid plan goes out the window as soon as they start.
Yeah, chicken and cattle I cannot herd.
Yeah.
What should everyone not do every day or avoid every day?
That's a good one.
Besides the heroin and the bottle of bourbon.
Sure. I guess like they should avoid the things that stop them from moving forward. Whether that's like people, substances, your own ideas. They should not do whatever those little things that like keep them from the preparation that you have to be doing to make the change, to make the leap and get out of that gray area and into like, let's just call it like the blue sky of what like it could be.
Where you find the reward. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Lastly, pretty awesome, dude. Inspire us. What advice do you have? What can you tell somebody who gets stuck in the gray area and wants to take that leap, whether it's just because they're stagnant, or they're stagnant and want to do something different, or they want to do something like great?
I don't have one great line. I guess I have just like a couple little things that kind of work for me. You really do become like, what you do, right? So like, if you want to run a marathon and you train to run a marathon, like you'll become a guy who runs marathons. You become like what you do. And part of that though is the doing, right? So like you're never going to become anything without the action and the doing part of it. And so number one is like you need to set the success and like the preparation to do the thing that you're like trying to get to. And, if there's an area that like you personally feel like you would have value, I think you have to like move in that direction, and you have to bet on yourself that you are going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make like the bet on like the bigger picture and the bigger value of like, it may not be there in the very beginning, but you got to keep your eye on like the prize, and you've got to be obsessed with the big picture. You've got to be obsessed with the graduation. not with the class that you got to go to on Monday morning at 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go to that class and do great at it. But the big picture, when you're like thinking about it, has to be on the graduation, and you've got to be obsessed with the big picture, and you've got to be thinking down the road. And if you could think of what those rewards would look like and work back to what you have to do to get them, your chances of getting there or getting damn close are far greater. And I remember somebody told me when I got out of the Navy that the more detailed and vividly you can paint the picture of what you want your life to look like, the closer you'll be able to get to that. The people who say, I'll do anything, anywhere, you can't really help those people.
Yeah.
And you need to really like take advantage of the time on this planet and be like a great human and a great American and do stuff that like you know you have the capacity to, and do it really well.
That's awesome. Greg, appreciate it, man.
Appreciate that, dude. This is great. Super fun.
Learned a lot. Don't forget Little Bell Cattle Co. on Instagram. Cathedral Relief. All right, you want CBD? Appreciate it.
I love CBD oil, by the way.
They're yours.
Those are. I was somebody that had like a lot of like sleep issues and stuff, and just like inflammation and things, and like the CBD is really, really good. I encourage people who have anything like that. Thanks, man. It's great. It was super fun. I really appreciate you making it to Montana.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back, and whenever you get the Wagyu ready.
There you go. We'll be ready.